Good evening, everyone. I call the May 23rd, 2024 City Council meeting to order. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. McAllister?
Here.
Mr. Foley?
Here.
Mr. Gephardt?
Here.
Mr. Howe?
Here.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy?
Here.
Mr. Ricks?
Here.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Here.
9 present.
Thank you. Councilman McElroy, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose bright stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bomb bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Good evening, everyone. Or good afternoon. We are now on to general communications. This is the announcements of congratulations, condolences, or community events. Do any members of the council have anything under general communications? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to executive communications. There are none. So now we're on public comment. So last call, there's a sign-up sheet on the podium here if you would like to speak at this time. So Rule 41, after general communications and prior to the consent calendar at the last regularly scheduled meeting of the City Council each month, there shall be a period of time not to exceed 30 minutes during which citizens may comment about Warwick city government issues subject to the following stipulations. The period of time for the public comment shall not exceed 30 minutes. Comments need to be brief in order to allow as many citizens as possible to participate. Each citizen signed up and present shall have not to exceed 5 minutes to speak, provided, however, that there is not more than 6 citizens are signed up and present. The 30 minutes will be split evenly among speakers. Time shall not be transferable among speakers. The topics for comment shall be issues directly affecting city government. City council members will not respond to questions during public comment period. The public comment session will terminate at the expiration of the earlier of all speakers concluding their allotted time or 30 minutes. Waiver of this provision requires a unanimous vote of the council. So we have 7 individuals who have signed up to speak tonight. I'm going to make a motion that we just allow everyone up to 5 minutes, just 2 additional speakers. It's budget night. And is there any objection? Well, second, thank you. That's a motion and second. Any objection to that? Okay, hearing none, we will start, and all 7 individuals will have up to 5 minutes. The first speaker this evening is Richard L. Phil, do you know if the mic is on?
Are we alive? Yes. I'm going to speak about the airport. There's been some major developments with the airport. They've taken over Fieldview Drive and they're tearing up the road. The city administration gave permission to do this, and I believe that it was in good faith. But at the same time, we need to follow the rules. The rules are that you go to the planning board, you get their permission, you go to the city council, all that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm talking about. However, the most important thing is we all need to remember that the airport is for the people. The airport's for us to fly out and have our friends fly in. We need to have adequate parking at the airport. They're taking away the parking. This spring, I went to Bradley Field during spring break. The airport parking was full. I parked about 3 miles away. I went to Logan Airport. Airport parking was full. I parked 5 miles away. At Green Airport, at this point in time, the same thing is happening. And now Breeze Airlines is being given about $10 million by the state of Rhode Island. Don't believe that the airport's not supported by the public. It is. You know, just yesterday they announced about a $10 million grant to Breeze to come and put more flights in. Okay, that's okay. But we need a place to park. Channel 10 said there's going to be 1 million passengers a year at the airport. Where are the people going to park? Instead, RIAC management wants to make this into a freight airport. They want to bring in Amazon. The mayor is fighting back. He's saying, we don't want trucks on the city streets. What's forgotten is when FedEx goes to the south side of the airport, then Amazon will come into the north side of the airport, and all their trucks will be going up and down through the city streets. We need to think smartly about this. Let's have the airport for the people, for passengers. That's why it's here. This is not supposed to be a freight airport. And I would encourage the city council to have the president of RIAC come to the meetings to describe why he's doing this. There's going to be a planning board meeting in a couple of weeks where, believe it or not, the planning board threw out his survey because they took somebody's land. One of our poor people, he's a nice guy. He's got a nice piece of land. He's been there for 40 years, and he wants to stay there. And what does the airport do? Comes in and takes some of his property. That's just not right. So anyway, the planning board said, go back and redo the survey. So what does the airport do? Just takes a street. Now all the neighbors are all riled up. You know, they're saying, oh, we don't have a place to walk our dogs. You know, they're taking our street away. It's a public street. You can't abandon a public street that has public use. So I think the people are finally waking up. They don't need the berm that they're building. They want the berm so that they can bring in more planes. That's the only reason for it. The berm in front of the warehouse, fine. If the warehouse goes in, that's okay. But the berm by Palace Avenue, no. That's for more parking of airplanes. We need to be real about this and say we need parking for the people, for their cars, so that they can come and go, so that they can enjoy the airport. We put up enough with the noise. We ought to be able to use the airport. And they just ignore all this. And then the worst case is they're planning on building a rotary, right? It says at grade level. The trucks can't get under the overpass at
You
the
have
rotary.
1 minute, Mr. Langseth.
They're going to spend thousands on a design that's going to end up in nothing because the trucks simply can't get under those bridges. Check it out. I put my machine up there and I found out the bridge is only 10 or 11 feet clearance. Trucks are 13 feet. It just doesn't make any sense. But it does make sense because what the airport's going to do, they're going to come back and say, well, we can't do the rotary, so we're just going to put the trucks down Strawberry Field Road. Don't worry about it. The trucks are going to be on the city streets. That's the way it's going to come down. And I do thank you for having the whole 5 minutes. I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker is Bob C.
Good evening, former Councilman Robert Cushman. Day of reckoning's coming to the city of Warwick, and I think anybody who understands basic planning for an expenditure that's going to eventually grow to $500 million to build 2 new high schools doesn't need a crystal ball to see the financial crisis that's going to envelope this city within the next 4 to 5 years because of total lack of planning by city and school leaders. A citizen with the level of debt that Warwick is going to have would be considered credit risk. And most likely, when we look at construction of schools throughout the state of Rhode Island, the $350 million is not going to be enough. We could be required to be 40, 50, 60, $70 million more maybe in bonding, and there is no plan and no one's presented how we would pay for that. Spending has increased an average of $8 million each year over the last fiscal years. The fiscal 2025 budget contains a structural deficit of $5 million. The new norm in the city is for budget gimmicks to conjure up new money. Get ready for traffic cameras that are going to produce $25,000 in new tickets a year so we can raise $2.5 million in revenue. Finance Director Peter Schaefer told the Warwick Beacon, the evidence shows that the money raiser, it is a money raiser and it works. What happened to public safety? The finance director has also found hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I equate it to my grandfather. When he used to come over to the house, he used to look in the seat cushions for nickels and dimes, and that's what we're doing in the city. I got to give him credit. He did find a lot of money, but that is one-time money. It's also a structural deficit. The school department's oblivious to the massive new tax increase that will await taxpayers. How do you explain an $8.2 million raise for teachers over the next 3 years to maintain labor peace? They abdicated their most important responsibility by allowing a non-elected bureaucrat to negotiate the teacher's contract with no consideration to all the expenses facing taxpayers. And it's also disingenuous for school leaders to ignore school bond debt like it doesn't exist because it's in the city budget and it's not in the school budget. It doesn't matter what budget these expenses are being recorded. Warwick taxpayers will be required to pick up the tab through massive tax increases that will have a profound impact on their lives. The fire department continues to burn a hole in taxpayer pockets. 5 years ago, we were promised a new contract that would save taxpayers millions of dollars in overtime expense. We were told that new OPEB provisions in the contract would reduce healthcare expenses by 30%. Councilors Howe, Sanapi, Travis, and McAllister used extraordinary measures to try to get the contract ratified as soon as possible, days before Christmas. I, along with many others, including Councilman Lattisaw, testified that the terms of that contract would not save taxpayers any money and that the OPEB provisions were illegal. Today, because of the contract provisions, the new norm for annual firefighter overtime is $4.5 million, even when the department contains more firefighters than past fire chiefs have testified over the last 20 years. At full complement, firefighter overtime was under $2 million. There simply is no justification for these overtime levels. When will Howe, Sanapi, Travis, and McAllister take responsibility for that disastrous contract? And until they do, how can anybody believe that they are serving the best interest of Warwick taxpayers in holding down expenses in the budget? We can't. They have no credibility. Council President McAllister also admonished the taxpayer, Barry Cook here, for asking questions about future borrowing and the effect it would have on taxpayers. Mayor Picozzi writes in his budget address that there will be significant costs for new school borrowing and promised to not, quote, impose too great a burden on those who live on the financial margins, unquote. How do you do that when you refuse to disclose to taxpayers the impact of property taxes this borrowing will have? This isn't rocket science.
Mr. Cushman.
Nothing promotes or prohibits the mayor from directing the finance director to perform this challenge, to perform this analysis. We can no longer go year to year and wait for a crisis to hit and then focus on it. The reason I'm here today is not to implore you to make changes to this budget. I believe that's a waste of time. I'm confident that you're going to fail to do that. My purpose is to go on the record to forecast a financial crisis that this city will hit, that will hit this city soon, and you can't claim you were not warned. And when this crisis hits, I will be the first one to come up here and stand at the podium and read your names into the record because you need to be held responsible for the fiscal disaster that you let occurred on your watch. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Rob C.
Rob Cody, Ward 7. For several years in a row at the council budget hearings, I've asked Mr. McAllister relative to the fire department if he knew how many sick days there were I won't ask him again because I know he doesn't read the contract and he doesn't do the analysis. But I will remind him and Mr. Howe how they bragged that the new Boston schedule would save $600,000. Steve, you remember that? You put your hammer down, it's going to save $600,000. Mr. Howe, same thing. And we told you, myself and Mr. Cushman, not a chance. Well, I want to congratulate the fire department for another world record. The previous world record was 1,653 sick days. And they said, well, that's because we have men out. Well, now they have more than a full complement. And this year, I know you guys don't know because you don't do the research, but the simple fifth grade math indicates 1,858.7499 sick days. How they get that thousandth of a decimal, well, that's another story. So when you look at it, and I have all the documentation on sick days for several years, going back to 2015, but if you just look at the last 5 years, and you look at the firefighters that have taken 20, 25, 30 sick days every year, it's the same group of guys. And if you spend a few minutes and you go on Google and you look around on Facebook, you know what they all have in common? Other jobs. That's a fact. If I had more time, I'd read their names out, but that's for another day. So the contract specifically states that if a firefighter takes out 2 sick days in a row, that the city may require a doctor's note. I wonder how many doctor's notes have been taken during the 1,858.7499 sick days. Probably none, because you know, and we know, but you guys don't have the integrity to do anything about it. It's a scam. And what the facts of the matter show, and the data shows, immediately when the unused sick time stopped, they started a revolving sick out. Those are the facts. Now, it can only be one or two things. Either, and I've said this before, we have an extremely unhealthy fire department that are taking this many sick days, or it's a scam. So which is it, right? It's one or the other. It can't be anything else. But now when you look at the national average of sick days per firefighter, Warwick is 4 times higher than the national average of sick days for firefighters. How can that possibly be? How do we get guys? I know if I had a guy working for me that every year took 25 sick days, he'd be canned in a minute. But that's what we have. And then we got a chief who gives himself an $11,000 raise, an assistant chief who gives his sister-in-law a $10,000 raise, and you guys do nothing about it. Nothing. You know, in the last 4 years, we've gone through $1.4 billion of expenditures during the budget hearings, and the guy from Ward 4 hasn't been able to develop a question about 10 cents worth of expenditures. Why is Mr. McElroy here? He doesn't ask any questions on behalf of his residents, his constituents. Sleep at the wheel, just let it go. This is why we got in this position that we're in now. You know, I don't understand how you guys allow this to take place. It's a scheme that has been going on for years, and nothing is done about it. Mr. Schaefer gives himself a raise last year. I can remember when he said, we have to cut some positions in the finance department. We don't have enough work. But then we hired other people full-time, put some people on part-time, and gave people raises. And now we want to balance the budget by an expected $2.5 million worth of revenue that we're going to get from speed cameras.
You have 1 minute, Mr.
when
Cody.
it hasn't even passed city council. So we're going to have flock cameras, facial recognition cameras, speed cameras, stop sign cameras. And we're going to balance all the raises on the backs of the people in Warwick. I think this council needs to do some soul searching and maybe take some basic finance classes, because you people are bankrupting the community. And I'm going to say it again, as Mr. Cushman said, I've been building schools for 30 years. There is no way that you're going to build the 2 schools as presented to the general public for $350 million. No possible way that will happen. Mark my words.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jim I.
kind of feel like I was here just a couple days ago, which, by the way, Mr. President, you did say at last meeting that there was going to be an open time for question. You did not say it was going to be limited. I just want to remind you of your own words. I had beseeched my ward people, my city council, my mayor, to please, in this 3 or 4 days since we last got together, to come up with some ideas about budget cutting. And I'm really looking forward to your innovative ideas that you've come up with in the last 100 hours. I was amazed that by the time I was standing here last time, by the time I went and sat down, my wife had a list of things that we could cut out of our budget that was this long. I didn't even realize she could write that quick. So I'm hoping that between the 10 or 12 of you, that you can come up with a list at least as long as my wife's in a few nanoseconds. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Douglas S.
Just want to address the city council. I'm a lifeguard at McDermott Pool. I've been there for 3 years. I'm also a lifeguard in the city of Delray, Florida, and I've been there for 3 years. In Florida, all of us are trained with Narcan, nasal Narcan, and I would like to see the city of Warwick, McDermott Pool, lifeguards, have the training, which is probably provided by the fire department, and the use in case of emergency. In Florida, I've seen the emergencies. Police and fire cannot arrive on time. We're the safety factor there at the pool, and that's the only reason I'm standing in front of this mic tonight. I'd like to see that happen. Thanks.
Thank you. The next speaker is Darlene N.
Hi, Darlene Netco, Ward 7, lifelong resident of Warwick, homeowner, taxpayer, teacher of 36 years in the classroom, president of the Warwick Teachers Union. I like living in Warwick. I've lived here all my life. We have good services in Warwick. We have a good police department, a good fire department. We have a trash collection. Live in another city or town in this state, you don't get that. We have streetlights. These things cost money. And I'm willing to pay my taxes to have those services. And I'm willing to pay my taxes to have good services regarding the schools. The other night, Mr. Howe brought up the unfunded mandates that our school budget is forced to include. And I won't read off that whole list. You can listen to the meeting from the other night. But we're spending an awful lot of money for things that RIDE requires that we do, and that the federal government requires that we do. And that's why the budget gets to be the way it is. And regarding the new schools are going to bring more people into this city. Right now, we lose students to North Kingston and Pontiac and other places that got that RIDE approved pathways for before Warwick got its act together under the previous superintendent. The current administration has its act together and is getting new pathways approved every day for Warwick. Unfortunately, when our students decide because there's a better field in North Kingston or a better field in Pontiac, they're going to go there, our money goes and follows them. And that we have RIDE to thank for also. But these new schools, whether there's debate about how much they're going to cost in the future, the voters voted for them. And the city took a good long time to approve that bond to make sure that what they were seeing was feasible. And If you look around this city, you see new houses being built every day. Go down Kilvert Street. I drive Kilvert Street every day. Every day there seems to be a new project going up. That will bring new people into the city. The older people are downsizing and younger families are moving in with kids. Our school system is growing and we want the appropriate schools for them to work to send their kids to. Tollgate suffered 3 elemental disasters this year. Wind, the roof came off. Water, radiator exploded. We had a flood that closed the building down for 2 weeks. We had to do distance learning. And 2 days after the explosion of the radiator, there was a transformer fire in the library that caused smoke damage. Pilgrim was built on a swamp. These schools cannot be kept up to code. The new schools are necessary to provide the proper education for our kids. The school budget is appropriate for what we need in order to provide the curriculum, et cetera, et cetera. And I only have 5 minutes, so I don't want to go over. I said a lot the other night. Mr. House said a lot. The school department finance officer said a lot, justifying why the school budget needs to be what it is. So, as I said from the top, I appreciate our fire, I appreciate our police, I appreciate all of our public works. Go to another city or town with a lower tax rate and have none of those services.
You have 1 minute, Ms. Necco.
Thanks. I'm done.
Thank you. The next speaker is Barry C.
Thank you. Barry Cook, 20-year resident, president of the Warwick Taxpayers Association. I just have 2 brief comments I want to make. I know you guys are tired of hearing me say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. During the 70s and into the 80s, I was a councilman in East Providence. We struggled with the same kinds of questions, issues, problems that you're struggling with. Same issues with the fire department, overtime, firemen doing roofing and siding, calling out sick. We had all that. I don't know if there's an easy solution to that. That's for you to work with. But what I wanted to point out tonight is there's a concept called zero-based budgeting. Some of you may be familiar with it. Some of you may not be familiar with it. There are cities and towns across the country that make this part of their budget process. And an easy way to describe it is, rather than come forward each year with a budget that you present to the mayor or to the city manager and they present to the council, all they do in the past is, well, I had a $5 million budget last year. I'm going to add 4% to it this year, and I'm going to present that as my new budget for the next year. In other words, no one is required to go back and re-justify certain aspects of their budget. So I had suggested it back in the 70s. I know it was before my time, it was my idea, and I had read about it, and it sounded really good to me, and I got nowhere with it. I'll leave it with you folks tonight for you to look into. My guesses are you'll get nowhere with it. But zero-based budgeting, when used properly, requires department heads and managers to take a look at what they did this year and make sure what they did this year is applicable to what's going to happen in the next year. Don't just keep adding 3 or 4% on to what you spent last year. The other thing that it ends up requiring is you don't get to a position where I'm at the end of the year and have $150,000 left in my budget. Let me find a way to spend that money so next year they won't take it away from me. Because next year you're going to be required under zero-based budgeting to re-justify your expenditures. So I'll leave that with you folks. That's a quick synopsis. There are 100 books in the library. If you choose to learn about it, It's online if you choose to learn about it. It's there if you don't want to learn about it. Just a suggestion. Another problem that we struggled with, and you're struggling with, and the city will struggle with forever, is in Rhode Island, the school committees can't raise taxes. So they just come to you people. And guess who raises the taxes? Guess who has to decide on the budget? Guess who has to cut out extracurricular activities? Guess who has to say there'll be no field trips? You tell them that, and then they bring the PTA in, and every child in the city comes in behind them, and then you reinstate what you said you were going to cut. So that was a battle I fought back then too. It'll never happen. But wouldn't it be nice if the school committees were responsible for raising their own revenues? Wouldn't it be nice if they were the final say on how they raise $180 million or 52% of our budget? Wouldn't it be nice if that was their responsibility? And what do you think might happen with subsequent budgets? I'll let you think about that. So I have no other comments to make.
You have 1 minute, Mr. Cook.
Thank you. I have no other comments to make. I made them the other evening. I'll close by saying we need to have a more sound fiscal management in this city. We have to stop spending, 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 and spending. That's up to you folks. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up on the agenda is the budget items. Number 1 is PCR 48-24. Okay, so we had a 7-hour budget hearing on Monday. We were asked questions to the administration and among ourselves here. So I do want to give the administration, if they have any remarks, want to give them an opportunity. And then how this process goes is council members will get recognized, and they will make an amendment. So I want you to read your amendment, get a second, and then come back and explain amendments and stuff like that. So you don't want to go into it already. You got to lay out what you're looking for, wait and get a second. Once you get a second, then you can explain your reasoning for proposing the amendments. But I do want to give the mayor and the administration an opportunity at this time. Mayor Picozzi.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to open this quickly. I won't take much of your time, but I've gotten some feedback that some members of the council were concerned, or maybe you can't hear you. I'm sorry. How's that? Hello? Okay. Okay, I've gotten some feedback that some of the council members were either concerned or unhappy that I've included projected revenue and the possibility of traffic cameras into the budget. If I've made anything feel like I've been presumptuous or stepped on toes, it certainly wasn't my intention. I apologize to you for that. I think you should know over the last 3.5 years, I've shown this council a high regard and a lot of respect. This is not something new. In all of my previous budgets, we put in assumed revenue that hadn't been realized yet, most notably the sale of school properties, former school properties, and they were far greater amounts. The schools didn't even have a for sale sign on them. We had to make a guesstimate of what revenue would bring in. We put it into the budget. They had to go through a bid process. The bid had to come to the city council. They had to approve whether it was enough money or even if you even wanted to sell it. So it's pretty much the same thing that we've been doing. It's not new. Revenue is all assumptions. The state budget hasn't been passed. We don't really know what we're going to get from state aid, if it's going to increase, decrease. The collection rate might come in different. We may get revenue from other sources. There's a couple of different ways you can handle this. You can vote to increase the levy, which would increase the taxes, the tax increase this year. I'm not a fan of that one. You could take the $1.3 million out of fund balance, also not a fan. Or you can try to make cuts here of $1.3 million, which would be very difficult to do. If we don't realize that revenue during the course of the year, my finance director and I can look for ways in the budget to take small bites and small cuts so we don't cut services. Or what I recommend, or I even ask, is that you have faith and confidence in us that we can do this job as we've been doing. And if we don't realize the $1.3 million, which actually I'm very confident is going to pass. A speaker before said it was 2.5 million. I don't know where that came from. It's 1.3. In talking with council members individually, there is support for this program. The police have done a lot of work on it. That'll be coming to you. But as I said, what I would ask you to do is just leave it to us. Show some faith and confidence. I think we've earned that over the last 3.5 years with you. Do you have anything to add, Peter? Thank you.
Thank you. And Solicitor Walsh made a good point that we also want to take up PCR 49-24, resolution adopting the budget and setting the tax rates of the city of Warwick for the fiscal year beginning June 1st, 2024 and ending June 30th, 2025. So at this time, I'm going to look for members of the council. Again, state your amendment. We'll look for a second, and then we'll come back to whoever's making the amendment to make comments on that, and then we'll open it up for members of the council to give their thoughts and concerns or ideas on the amendment that is proposed. So at this time, I would like to propose an amendment. It has 4 parts in it, so I'm going to read off each amendment. I'll look to see if I can get a second, and then I will explain what I'm looking to do. First up is reduce the revenue municipal court fines line item by $1.3 million. This is Department 1000512. Reduced, that's on page 62. Also, as part of this amendment, I would like to increase the municipal court salary line to add an additional judge. That is Department 27, line 27101 by $15,000. That's on page 12. I would like to increase the police night program, which is line 30-140 by $45,000. That's on page 25. And I would like to increase the Public Works Highway General Services line item, which is 63380 by $90,000. And I would like to increase the Public Works Field Maintenance Materials line item, which is 70281 by $250,000. So I know that's a lot. I'm going to say it one more time. I would reduce the revenue municipal court fines line item by $1.3 million. I am looking to increase the municipal court salaries line item by $15,000. I'm looking to increase the police night program line item by $45,000, and I am looking to increase the Public Works Field Maintenance Materials by $250,000. Okay. And pay for it with the property tax levy. So first, do I have a second? Second by Councilman Ricks and Councilman Foley, Councilman Lattiser, Councilwoman Travis. Okay. So I will give my positions and then open it up to members of the council. I respect the mayor, the way that he came and spoke on the revenue of the municipal court fines. I think it's putting the court jumping ahead. I think if this had come a couple weeks before, we would give the council a little more knowing there's just so many factors that we just don't know at this point. We don't know who the vendors are going to be. We don't know who the how many cameras, where they're going to go, what the policy is. All that is to come, and I understand that. And if and when the administration presents this and makes their case, and the council votes for it, the revenue could come in and it could offset everything that we're doing. And in the end, it could be a non-issue. But that is my position on that. A couple other priorities that I'm looking to do is add another municipal court judge, the same process that we have now. If in the future there is additional activity in the municipal court, we may need another judge, and so I would like to see a line item for that. The police night program, that is a program that the police department has for when we get additional calls. We get a lot of calls on speeding in the neighborhoods, traffic violations, stuff like that. This allows the police department to put those streets or that neighborhood on a list, and they can kind of do some extra patrols, and it helps with the funding for that. So we're not taking away from another program. It has not been given any additional funds in a number of years, and each ward is represented in that. So that's one of the things I'm supporting on this. The other two big ones here are the $90,000 for Public Works Highway General Services. And if this amendment were to go through, I'm happy to talk with the administration on finding line items and homes for all this if the treasurer has some concerns. But I thought the way that, and it was to the mayor, had the idea of having this ARPA funds to the council for the individual awards. And we had a website, and we had public hearings and public meetings, and got emails from individuals, residents, to the individual council people looking for smaller but important projects. And it was great. We had federal funds, and we know that those federal funds are running out. But I was just really impressed. The administration did a great job. I mean, this was additional funds that came in, but not additional personnel to do this. But they were able to do that. And I think the council was able to advocate they were here directly from the constituents on a project or two that was really important to them. Now, we all had $200,000 of federal money. I don't think that's something we can do. I also don't think that we could add on a huge amount of work to the day-to-day of our city employees. But I was thinking that $10,000 per ward, that's the $90,000 figure, that we could continue to do these smaller projects that, an association, a community association, or a neighborhood has really been looking for and asking for. And it kind of gives everybody an opportunity to say, okay, the DPW is working hard on these huge projects and taking care of our roads and doing stuff like this. But if we say, hey, we have some funding here, we'd really like to get in another, buy another sign that flashes your traffic and your speed in a school zone, or I've done welcome neighborhoods, or fix a basketball hoop in the community, different projects like that. I just thought it was an excellent idea by Mayor Picozzi of utilizing these ARPA funds, and the community was able to participate. I did a mailing on it. We got we still have the website up if you're looking, if any money left over for that. So I thought it would be a good practice on a smaller scale. So that's why I proposed that amount. And finally, in my 4 points here is field maintenance, public works, field maintenance, and maintenance materials. We have heard, and I'm going to let Councilman Gephardt, who is kind of gave me this idea. We have heard from the residents of Warwick that over the next couple of years, when these new schools are going to be built, the fields are going to be, they're being built on the field. So we're going to need the residents, the students to go on different things. One of the projects is the track at Warwick Vet School. I think it may be a good idea, and my proposal is to have $250,000 within the city side of Warwick and say, listen, we are interested. We've heard you. We want to help out to improve the track, to improve the fields. It may be more. It may cost more than $250,000. But maybe our friends in the school department can come in and partner up. I think it's a very unique idea. It's not just handing over additional funds to the school department, because we all understand we can say we want this $5 to go this way, but the school department could say, okay, and take it and then spend it any which way. This gives the city some, extra cushion, but we're all one city, whether we're the school department, the city council, the mayor's office, students, whether you have students in the schools or not, we are all one city and all one community. So I thought this was an excellent idea from one of my colleagues. I thought it was a creative idea that keeps everything. It's like, hey, we want to try, we want to be part of it. Here's one way to do that. So I don't want to use up my 10 minutes. That is my proposal and my explanation. It has been seconded, and I'm happy to open it up to council members who would like to talk. And I'm going to go with Councilman Gephardt first.
Thank you, Council President. So, generally in favor of what we have here, what you've proposed. I agree in the cautious approach on the cameras. We certainly don't want to give the perception to the public or amongst ourselves that this is a foregone conclusion. There's some gravity to this decision, and we want to make the decision with both eyes open and not feel like we're backed into a corner. So definitely support this approach. In terms of the smaller line items, I agree. I think both the night program and the ARPA projects are direct benefit that go directly to the residents. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a rounding error in this budget. And then I think that the big ticket item here is, the context for me on this is, both as a parent with kids that play sports, also as a board member of Warwick PAL. The number one complaint that we get is that there is a lack of fields, of appropriate fields in this city to support the athletics that we have going on. And I know we've got a longer term plan. If you look, a few years out, there's monies in future plans for Mickey Stevens. But the issue with the fields exists today. And the day they break ground on these new schools, the issue gets 10 times worse. And so we're trying to be proactive here. We heard the school department come and say, hey, this is one of the projects that, they have foresight in this as well. We're not trying to break the bank here and raise taxes, to a level that's unsustainable. However, this is a way that I feel like we can all chip in. This again is a direct benefit to many of our residents. Folks have grandkids that play sports. Folks have kids who play sports. The kids, this is a direct benefit to the youth. And it also, ensures that we can help direct the spending to the priority that, that we've identified here on the council. And so I would ask you to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Foley.
Thank you. I also support the 4 points that you have brought up. And just to follow up on Councilman Gephardt's comments, I like the idea of putting that money into the DPW budget to fix or maintain or better maintain the track at Vets. One of the and I love the 90,000, 10,000 per award. One of the projects that we were asked about in Ward 1 and we used the opera money to do it, was a walking track around North Country Club Field. Since that track has been open, I do not think there's been a day. Now, we opened it in the winter per se, that track has not been used. The neighborhood, the people are constantly out there walking. It's enjoyable. I think the vet track needs to be kept up so that the neighbors and the city, the residents can make use of that. And I will be supporting as presented.
Thank you. Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had spoken my piece on this 1.3 million Monday night regarding those speed cameras, and I haven't changed my opinion on that at all. I think that was very presumptuous, and I have concerns with something being approved that, let alone vote on it, hasn't even been presented to us. We have no idea what these cameras are going to do, include, where they're going to be, how they're going to be used, how are they going to be calibrated, etc. But I found it particularly concerning for the rationale of the cameras as a revenue generator, as opposed to a safety issue, as opposed to protecting the kids at the schools, as opposed to keeping people safer from flying down the roads at 20, 30 miles an hour over the speed limits. And I know that wasn't the intent, but that's the perception that came across to me and some of the folks that reached out to me. This isn't the same as saying, okay, last year we had X dollars and cents coming in from the state, and we anticipate this year we're going to have a little more or a little less. This isn't the same thing. It's a brand new item, brand new. And if we approve the budget with this in it, what happens if it doesn't get approved? What happens if it doesn't come to be because you can't get the cameras? Or we don't have enough of them, we need more of them. Or we don't appreciate or like the way the information is going to be stored on those cameras. I can't support something that hasn't even been vetted initially before this city council. That's what we're here for. The other items, I will support those other items. I think they're all well intended. I think they're needed. I will also, again, point out the lack of urgency, I guess, because there certainly is no urgency to do up the Mickey Stevens Sport Complex. There's a $7 million bond been sitting out there since Mayor Avdesian was here. And we heard the other night it's still sitting there, and obviously, and according to testimony, won't be used for anything else but. It's troubling that that type of money is sitting there waiting to be used. And now we're talking about a track that's not so good. We're talking about a tennis court that's not so good. We're talking about other things, that are not so good. But yet, there's never been a sense of urgency or enough sense of need to use that money that the voters approved to do anything with those, with that Mickey Stevens Sports Complex. So that continues to be a concern. That's where I am on this item. The question I would have, Mr. President, is I may have missed where you want to, or what you want to do as far as how are you going to eliminate that 1.3 million out of the revenue?
I'm reducing the revenue municipal court fines. That's the line item we're taking it from, 1.3 million. That's where it was.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Ricks.
Thank you. I fully support this amendment. My colleagues have already discussed at length the $1.3 million. I don't think that it's the intention of the administration or anyone on this council that if automated speed cameras were approved, that would be for the purpose of raising revenue. I'm not going to go into the merits of that now because it's not before us, and I don't want us to get into any trouble with the Open Meetings Act. I'll save that discussion for if and when it comes up before us. But speaking directly as to that revenue, yeah, we don't want to have this in the budget before the substantive item actually comes before us. We don't want to presume that that money is going to be there and put pressure on ourselves that if we don't later approve it, then there's going to be a $1.3 million hole in the budget. So I think it's good for public transparency and good for us as a council to remove that particular item. I'm also in support of the additional funding for the municipal court judge position, especially if it becomes necessary. It's good for us to, there is certainly a distinction here too between assuming revenue and planning ahead for contingency of a potential expenditure. The $45,000 for the night program, I know that the council president and we had discussed this previously, and then at the earlier budget hearing and presentation, I had asked the police department for information on the history. They had gotten back to me, and I believe that every year since fiscal year 2014, it had been at that amount of 45,000, with one exception in which the amount had been reduced to 30,000. But the program goes back to fiscal year 2007. I don't believe that we were able to recover information quickly on the amount back in 07, but suffice to say, there has certainly been inflation these last 10 years. This is an important program. I think it's very much money well spent to have the police officers have that little bit of additional time at all of those various locations across all 9 wards, making sure that we have that speeding and stop sign enforcement to improve quality of life in the neighborhood, improve safety in the neighborhoods. So I am absolutely fully in support of that investment. The next item is the $90,000 for line item 63-380, general services in the DPW, intended for those types of city council expenditures. In my years on the city council, I'm sure that I've had similar experience to many others, where under different administrations, not intending to criticize this administration, it's a matter of the dynamics between any city council and any mayor, and I saw that play out especially with mayors Avedisian and Solomon alike, where if I wanted to advocate for a particular improvement in Ward 2, I would sometimes be met with, well, Councilman, you voted on the budget. Where in the budget are you going to find it? Find the money for that particular priority, whether it was a sign being put up or a city-owned gate being replaced or whatever the relatively minor expenditure would happen to be. Well, if we have $10,000 per ward, then for these relatively small expenses, now we have an answer for that. And these are the types of things that really do make a difference for so many constituents. It's money well spent, and when we can make those little improvements on those things that so many people see every day, it gives people pride in their city, It lets people know that the neighborhoods are not being ignored. The last item, I'd like to commend the council president and Councilman Gebhardt for their innovation here. I think that the allocation of $250,000 towards fixing the track at Warwick Vets, so long as, of course, there is that cooperation between the school department and the city on that, also very much money well spent. We saw in some emails that were forwarded to us earlier the photos of that track at Warwick Vets. We received additional information from the school department and otherwise confirming that yes, other schools are also going to be relying on that track. We can all see the need there. I would support a total of $500,000 for that track, which is the estimated amount that it would take to fully fix, or rather repair and replace it as necessary. But I'm going to make a motion a little bit later. I think that this is an excellent start. And even if my motion does not gather support, the necessary support to pass, then for those reasons, I'm not going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Travis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also agree with everyone who's spoken already about the 1.3 million. And it's not that I'm defending the administration or anything, but I think basically everyone sitting here is concerned about the speeders or the red light, you know, the speeding going through red lights. And I think they just assume that that's what we all gonna want. But the fact of the matter, there was too many questions that we didn't have answers to. So I couldn't support that either. So I was glad that you brought that up, because I mean, we don't know how many cameras, where they're gonna be, and how much are they, and the whole, 9 yards about that. So that was a big concern. I think it's good that we get another judge, because I mean, I traffic court, I see all the tickets we're getting, and I think we're going to need more help. So I think that's only a matter of time. And plus, if we get the cameras eventually, we're going to need that judge. The night program, I was a big supporter of the night program from the beginning. And I'll tell you, $5,000 goes fast. It doesn't take too long before you know it, they're saying, oh, your money's all used up already. And it's happened to me many times over the years. Us getting the extra money, I think each ward would be very grateful. I know it's very aggravating when people want something done and you go and you ask, can we get this, can we do this? This has to be fixed, and something just sits there and it's not getting the maintenance that it has. We all know things, they love to build things, but they don't like to maintain them. And that's what happens. So I think if we had extra money that we could do what we want to do for our constituents, that would be great. And of course, Vets is in Ward 6. And a long time of trying to take care of the field, the track, tennis courts. They just didn't do it. Now we have a good relationship with the school committee now, but I've been here a long time, and I've been burnt too many times when we give them money for something and they use it for something else. And I've always said, if I'm writing the check that you want, I want to know where that money's going. But how many times every one of you that sit here know we don't get that? They'll take that money and they use it for something else. I'll give you a small little example. The football field at Vets, it had some broken glass in it one year because I guess they took some of the dirt from the public works, and it had broken glass in it. One football player got cut under his eye. So I started screaming and yelling, saying, well, you got to put new sand down. I had Di Gregorio from Ward 3, and I had Pisatoro from Ward 5. We had a meeting. Mr. Shapiro was there. Parks and Rec was there. The maintenance people from the school committee was there. And believe it or not, I can read a blueprint. So I'm looking at the blueprint, and I see these little dotted lines in the middle, and everybody's talking to each other. And I said, Mr. Shapiro, can I ask a question? Why is the only the middle of the field got lines. What are you gonna put the C in? So whoever had, I think, it might have even been Mike Rooney at the time, was there talking, and they said they're gonna do the middle. I said, what do you mean the middle? Just the middle of the field? And they said, oh yeah, that's where I said, when I frost the cake, I frost the whole cake, not just the middle. Now if you're gonna fix this field, you're gonna fix the whole field. But so many times things like that happen, and you gotta stay on top of it. But knowing that this money would be us kind of saying where it's gonna go. It's gonna go on the track at vets. That makes me feel a lot better. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to kind of follow what Councilman Ricks did and just speak on every item. I, for one, am not bothered by the 1.3 included because every budget has a projection. This is a projection. So therefore, when the administration presents the budget, I look at it, I say, oh, a projection. So I do understand why my colleagues are concerns where they say they want to take it out, which then leads me to the municipal judge, which respectfully contradicts the purpose of taking out the 1.3. Let's not include that as revenue, but let's spend the money for another judge for when this passes. I'm just asking everyone to reflect on that for a moment. So we don't want to include the revenue, but we want to include the expenditure for the functions and the operations of something that we don't want to include as revenue. Just that being said. The second I would like to speak to is the 10,000 per ward. I'm not comfortable including that, Mr. President, and I do thank you for having that consideration. I'll tell you why. First of all, this is going to sound, but in 2024 prices, I think for one crosswalk, I think each ward spent $8,000 for the two signs on each side. I believe it was about $8,000, almost $9,000 for those signs. It could be $13,000 for all I know. So the $10,000 is a start, but it's certainly not going to cover the challenges that we're going to face as council people. That's number one. The second part is that was a unique situation where we had the ARPA money, as the council president said. That was a once in a lifetime, once in a pandemic, God willing, situation where we were given money by the federal government, and wisely it was decided from the administration, this body, that we would use it towards infrastructure. And then, of course, the mayor said, it would be, let's allocate money to each district, which we were able to do, $1.8 million. We were able to do a lot of good things, and we're still doing them in our wards. But in the past, we always would go to the DPW, call DPW in, say, hey, this is our concerns in our ward. And it was always for the betterment of the citizens, always for the need of the citizens in that community. We never had to allocate separate money for that. I just get nervous of the standard that now it sets. Where does that mean we're capped at the 10,000? And what's the regulation for where that money should be spent, where that money should be sent, and does it become like the night program leading into the final thing, where we're capped at an amount that we can request services for our citizens? I'll step off I won't comment on the night. Honestly, I've always requested, and I've never had an issue when it comes to the services that the police provide for the safety of the citizens. So that's something I don't think I have enough, knowledge, because they've always been responsive. And the final thing is the field maintenance. I would agree with that, but at the same time, I would end it with, I understand that if we reduce the 1.3 million, we have to get it from somewhere. And I did not speak to my constituents or my neighbors or my friends about their own personal finances, but I will say this. Over the course, I kind of did my own analysis of my home budget, and I can tell you that as a middle-class, regular, blue-collar individual, my savings is down 38% trying to modify to the cost of inflation, the cost of living that we as citizens have gone. That is not adding or subtracting anything special. That is the daily, monthly, the weekly, the monthly, and the yearly expenses. That savings account I was able to put 38% less. So that's something I'm keeping very strongly in mind, understanding it's not my situation, it's everyone's situation. And if we just say, well, then let's add another layer or increase the levy, that's going to affect them. So in closing, I thank my colleagues for the time in this discussion. Mr. President, thank you for these recommendations, because everything you recommended affects the entire city. But I personally, respectfully, will be voting against this, because I don't want to reduce that 1.3. I think that it's a projection, which is what a budget is. Thank you.
Councilman McElroy.
Yes, I think I agree with Councilman Howe. I think that 1.3 million is a projection based on what the city administration thinks for the next year will be the city's revenues and expenses for the next year. I feel that the 1.3 million is a good estimation. I think it's a projection, and I think it's right on the money. I will be supporting that.
Thank you. Councilman Sinapi.
So I spoke on Monday it was now, and this obviously checks off a lot of boxes for me, gets more money for the schools like I want it, funds the new judge position to take care of the additional citations that we'll have from the cameras, and helps get the schools money by not actually contributing to the MOE, which is always good, the maintenance of effort, for those who don't know, because normally if we give the schools more funding, we have to give them that amount at a minimum every year going forward. By doing it in the manner proposed, that will not be necessary. So it is a well thought out idea. I like it. And obviously I support the 90K, because I mentioned it Monday. That's a great idea for the wards. I think nice tangible benefit. And the night program speaks for itself. Everyone loves it consistently. I've never heard a bad thing about it once, other than why can't it be back sooner? So I don't foresee any problems in that regard. I agree with Councilman Howe completely on the cameras point. I have no issue with including expected revenue, just like these are expected expenses in the budget too. Everything's expected, projected. Very few things in here are set in stone, because it's not necessarily possible right away. So I'm not going to naysay one more thing that's projected. That being said, I'm going to vote in favor of this with the knowledge that immediately thereafter, I'm going to propose an amendment to raise the projected revenue for the cameras to actually basically double what it was originally. And I'll explain why when it comes time, because it's not the time to discuss that. And also, I'm going to propose the tax levy be put back to what the mayor had it, because I don't agree with increasing taxes to pay for these increases elsewhere in the budget. However, as Councilman Ricks wisely put it, I'm not going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. This hits literally all my boxes, so I'm gonna go with it, and then I'll propose an amendment thereafter.
Thank you. And we are one city, so Mayor, if you want to weigh in, let the mayor weigh in on any amendment made this evening.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I ask a question? Are these amendments all going to be voted as a package deal, or each one going to be voted on separately?
This is one amendment, so this is one vote.
Wow. Okay. Well, I've already told you about how I feel about the cameras, and these cameras are never meant to be revenue generators. They're meant to change behavior, because traffic safety is out of hand in this city. I'm sorry. This was never meant to be a revenue generator. It's a side benefit of them. But traffic control is out of hand in this city. I hear from a lot of residents multiple times, the people that you hear from. It's the number one issue, and the police are concerned about it, and they've come to me with this. So I stand my ground on that. I'm asking you to leave it in the budget, the projected we can deal with it later without causing a tax increase. And I have to be honest with you, this is probably one of the things I would consider vetoing. I feel that strongly about it. I don't want to put a greater tax burden more than 1.5%, which hurts me to do as it is. The second point on the judge, the saying you were looking for earlier, Mr. President, was putting the cart before the horse. I just think it's I don't know, it's kind of hypocritical. We may not vote for the camera, so we can't have it in there, but in case we do, let's have an extra judge. I mean, you know, I'm not really opposed to it, but I'm opposed to the entire amendment because it's not broken up into 4 parts. The night program, as we were speaking, I got a text from Colonel Connor. Recruiting is going south. We have a hard time putting patrols on the street. You can put $1 million into this budget, it's not going to work. We have to pay officers overtime to cover the regular shifts. We can't fill details, we can't fill special overtime. So as I said, if you put it in there, the program's not going to grow or improve. We just don't have the manpower. Our current recruiting is failing miserably. We just don't have the personnel. And I'm hoping that changes in the future, but I don't know when. The $10,000 per ward, that's a great idea, but I would ask that you look at it 1 year at a time. In this budget, maybe additional $10,000 from the ARPA funds to add to the pool of money you all have now, and it may top off a project you're already doing. So it would make it more significant spending than just $10,000 on its own. And as far as the schools, this one's a tough one for me. As you've learned in the past, the money you give to the school department, you can't give with any conditions. You can give them the $250,000 and they can decide if they have a more urgent need than fixing the track. We saw it last week, and I don't want to say I respect these people right here, and I'm very friendly with them, but last year we had an agreement on ARPA funds, and it was supposed to be for a one-time expense, and they ended up using it to fund a pay increase for the teachers and having a 1-year contract. And then after that, they came back and said, oh, by the way, by state law, we don't have to give it back to you. So it cost us another $1 million, you know, in addition to the state fund. So we can't have any ironclad guarantee that the money will be used for that project. They may have a boiler breakdown or something else like that. And again, no offense, but those things could happen. And then it would take an action of the school committee. So we can't give it to them with any conditions attached to it. Now, however, if you do give it to them, I would ask that that comes out of ARPA funds. Other than that, as I said, there are parts of this I agree with, but parts that I strongly disagree with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So,
excuse me, is it okay if the finance director adds something?
Well, we heard from the mayor, so I don't want to keep going. I mean, we heard from the mayor. So it's been moved and seconded. I think we've heard from everybody on their thoughts on this. I know it's a big amendment. Again, this is not the only amendment that's coming. So a number of things could be addressed on this. I understand the administration's position. I think this is a solid amendment. You know, and just like I agree, the whole budget is projections, and we understand that. And if new revenue comes in, you know, that's going to offset anything taken from the rainy day fund or going forward. So I think everyone has had an opportunity to speak on this. So it has been moved in second. So the clerk will call a roll for favorable action on the amendment.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
No.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Yes. Ms. Travis?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no. Amendment passes.
Thank you. I do have one more smaller amendment to propose, and then I open it up to the rest of my colleagues. These are 2 smaller ones to fix some salaries that were incorrect, different than what we submitted. First is from the Department 13101, the city clerk. She mentioned at the budget hearing that one of the salaries was off by $7,198. And the legislative salary line item was also off by $1,483. That is 1636. So one is, I'm putting them together as one thing, $7,198 added to the city clerk salaries municipal line, and legislative salaries, $1,483. I propose, again, I propose to take that from line item 18-400, Finance Administration Contingency. So that we reduce that line item from proposed $200,000 to by $8,681, making that new line, if passed, $191,319. Do I have a second?
Second.
The second by Councilman Lattiser, Councilman Gephardt, Councilman Foley, and Councilman Ricks. Any questions or comments from members of the council? Again, these were items that were discussed on Monday evening, just system clerical errors, $8,681 in total. Administration, any comments on the amendment? Okay, it has been moved in second. The clerk will call a roll for favorable action on the amendment.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt? Yes. Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Yes. Ms. Travis?
Yes.
9 yes, Amendment 2 passes.
Thank you. Amendment 2 passes. Okay, members of the council, anyone have any amendments they'd like to offer? Councilman Sinapi.
So an increase to the municipal court fines, I think you said it was 100-0512 line item to 2.6 million. And a reversal on the tax levy increase to bring it back to 1.5.
Okay, do we have a second on Councilman Sinapi's proposal? Second by Councilman McElroy and Councilman Ricks. Go ahead, Councilman Sinapi.
So, as probably everybody here knows, the cameras have been all around the state lately. And if you look into it, they did a Turn to 10 story on it not too long ago. And they showed the revenue that came in to several of the cities. Like one camera brought in 2.7 million on its own in 2 years, another one 2.4. So we're not talking about small amounts of money. And if you just take all of the cities that they had in the article and you average it out, you're at like 5 and change for the 2 years. So we cut it in half and instead apply it here with the 6 months. Well, actually, it was like 15 and change, whatever. There's math. It's annoying. Either way, it comes out to 2.6 for 6 months as opposed to the 1.3 that we had. I understand that our revenue was conservative, which is perfectly fair. And to be honest, the number I'm proposing is still conservative because it relies on an average, which includes one particular city whose numbers dragged down everything drastically because of just the demographics. And frankly, it would be a more accurate estimate if I didn't include it in here, but I just want it to be thorough, and I averaged them all. So it's still a conservative estimate by any stretch of the imagination, and I don't want to increase taxes more than necessary, frankly. And as Councilman Howe pointed out, it's not necessarily something people can afford to do in all cases, or more importantly, now when everything else is happening. Well, some costs are going down, but inflation and whatnot still quite high, and real estate's a freaking nightmare. And it is important to point out that, let's say we go with the other route of relying on the increased tax levy, and then we also get the revenue from the cameras. Like a surplus is all well and good, but that doesn't really translate to any benefit for a taxpayer. It just sounds nice. There was a surplus. Yay, too bad you paid more taxes. So at least now if we do it with the projected revenue instead of a higher tax rate, there's a tangible benefit to the taxpayer right off the bat. And that's all I got.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on the proposed, Solicitor Walsh?
Councilman Sinapi, just wanted to clarify the amendment. So in the amendment number 1, it reduced down the revenue municipal court fine collections expectation to a $300,000 level with the 1.3 reduction. Are you asking to, you mentioned 2.3, are you asking to add 1.3 million back, or are you looking to raise it all the way to an expected revenue collection of 2.3 million?
2.6, raise it all the way up to 2.6. It effectively doubles from 1.3 to 2.6.
So the original line item was 1.6 million, 1.3 of which was the anticipated cameras. So that we're just working off different baselines.
I understand now. That makes more sense. All right.
So right now, that number per the prior amendment is the $300,000, which is the non-camera related fines collection baseline. So
like the easiest way to think about it is to revert it to what it was and then add in enough to bring up the camera cost alone to 2.6, camera revenue rather.
So the line item currently reads 300,000. You are proposing to raise 2.6 million in camera related activity essentially. So that account would be 2.9 million. And so that 2.6 million increase, you are looking to reduce the property tax levy?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
So that light item would now, is proposed to be a total of 2.9?
So the amendment that is by Snappy, seconded by Ricks, would increase the municipal court fines line item, which has been adjusted currently to a $300,000 level. He is seeking to add $2.3 million to that revenue estimate, which would bring it to $2.6 million on that line item. And it would come with a corresponding reduction to the property tax levy, which was just increased by 1.3. It would be reducing $1 million in net from the original starting point. But it would be an offset of the current proposal.
Okay, I just want to make sure we have the right number on that. Councilman Ricks.
I'll just mention at this opportunity, and I'm not going to mention this every time, but I seconded Councilman Snappy's motion for the purpose of discussion. I think it's important at these budget hearings that we all have the opportunity to have all of these amendments heard, have a full discussion. However, for the reasons discussed earlier, I'm not going to be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on the Snappy amendment? Mayor, any questions or comments on the Snappy amendment?
Well, of course, I support it. I don't want to cause a greater tax increase to people that we need to do. People are struggling right now. I would, Councilman Snappy, I would ask him to amend it back to 1.3 or whatever covers everything. I really, are you listening, Bill? I'm sorry. I said, of course, I support it, and I support the intent of it. I would prefer it be amended back to the original 1.3. To stay realistic. But again, I don't want to give a bigger tax increase to the residents than we can. I mean, the last amendment, everything was packaged around to maybe some people wanted this, maybe some people that wanted that, but you had to vote for everything to get what you wanted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And before, if there's no more, I'm just going to call on Solicitor Walsh just on one of the questions that's come up a couple times.
So the charter section 5-20 speaks to anticipated new revenue. And it's pertinent in this conversation because it's a moving goalpost as to if this revenue source may exist and to what extent and when it will deliver whatever amount if it should get there. But section, just to inform and remind the council and the members of the public, Charter section 520, anticipated new revenue. No revenue from a new source not previously stated in the budget shall be included unless the mayor and the director of finance shall determine that the facts clearly warrant the expectation that such revenue shall actually be realized in cash during the fiscal year in the amount stated and shall certify such determination in writing to the council. The mayor has presented his issues here, but it's something that the council needs to consider about, does the facts clearly warrant the expectation that these revenues shall be? And that's, I think the underscoring the questions that you've said, but I just wanted to reiterate that the charter anticipated this situation, and just wanted to note that for the members.
So does that mean the budget we were provided in writing from the mayor and the finance director, which mentions the traffic cameras and whatnot, and explains them, would that constitute an adequate abidance of 520?
It would be a determination of the council is if that's sufficient of saying in writing, but it's still the standard with which a factual determination that this council needs to decide whether the presentation makes clear that the facts clearly warrant the expectation that such will be delivered.
So that would require someone to request the determination, right?
It's a discretionary matter ultimately to the council to decide if it's satisfactorily fulfilled.
Got it.
Mr. Chairman, I'll not be supporting this motion. Again, it's a moving target, and it's just seems to me that it's based on speculation and assumptions. It's based on speculation that it's going to get to us very soon, which is possible. It's based on speculation that, this is the cameras now, that they're going to be approved. It is based on speculation that we're going to be able to get the cameras and that they're going to be installed and operated in a timely manner. And by the time this is all said and done, we could be lucky if you get 6 or 7 months of use out of these cameras, if it gets passed by the council. I think from a business perspective, it's a lot of speculation, and it's a lot of, it may happen or it may not happen. I am more concerned with the what ifs, because we've been talking about the availability of products for 2 years. We just got beat up by 6 or 7 grand on a pickup truck because it couldn't be provided after 9 months of waiting for it, through no fault of ours. When I say ours, the city. So there's just too many variables in this. There's too much speculation in this, and I will not be able to support it. Thank you.
Councilman Gephardt.
Just briefly, yeah, I agree. I'm also not in support of this amendment, and the solicitor's reading of section 5-20 reinforces that for me. So what I'd say is that, the administration has clearly published to us and obviously done the groundwork to come, a quote from the budget message, to comfortably estimate annual associated revenues of 2.5 million. Implementation of this program is not expected until late fall of calendar year 2024, and as such, the budget conservatively estimates 1.3 million associated revenue. So, I would be comfortable reinstating that line item up to 1.3 million, but I think to go beyond that, I don't think we could meet the standard of, that the finance director and mayor have determined that the facts clearly warrant the expectation that such revenue shall be actually realized. I think what we can meet that standard with is as high as 1.3 million and no higher. So I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Happy.
So that's a good point. And given that there's support, at least some, for a return to the original number, I'll happily do that. It's just a question of the mechanism upon which to do it. Would you prefer I withdraw and go again, or amend the proposed amendment, solicitor?
Is there any objection to the councilman changing his amendment at this time? Okay, Councilman Sinapi, go ahead. Hearing none, Councilman Sinapi, you may.
So in that case, the change would be to revert it to its original number. I'm not going to bother to try to state it. Solicitor has it right in front of him.
Sure. So the unanimous consent for the councilman to amend his amendment to be the restoration of the $1.3 million that was estimated in revenue for this account. So it's essentially $1 million less of a shift from before. So it would be adding $1.6 million of anticipated revenue to the $300,000 of municipal court fines, which would bring it back to the originally projected $1.6 million with a corresponding offset to the shift to the property tax levy.
Just point of order. I think you said add 1.6. I think what you meant. Your grand total was correct. So add 1.3 to the total of to the currently remaining 300,000, bringing it to 1.6.
Thank you, Councilman, for the clarification. Yes, the current item is 300,000. The revised amendment is to add back the 1.3 million that was shifted and bring it back to the original proposed 1.6 million.
Okay, Councilman Howe. Oh, yeah, we had this, no one objected, so we're good on that. So what is before us at this time is to add 1.3 million into that revenue municipal light item 100-0512, 62. Councilman Lattice.
Mr. Chairman, I will not be supporting this motion. This simply brings us back full circle to essentially where we were in the beginning. I won't be supporting this for the same reason I didn't support it in the beginning. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the amendment? Okay, it has been moved in second, so we'll call this the Sinapi Amendment. Favorable action to add $1.3 million to light item 100-0512. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. McAllister?
No.
Mr. Foley?
No.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
No.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
No.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
No.
4 yes, 5 no. Amendment fails.
Okay, the amendment fails. Councilman Sinapi, you still have the floor. Sure. Councilman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since that didn't pass, I would like to, from the McAllister amendment, I would like to eliminate the municipal judge, 15,000 for the municipal judge. And I would also like to eliminate the $10,000 per ward for a total of $90,000 from that line item. For clarification, I believe the mayor did indicate that with the ARPA money, he could add an additional 10,000. Did I understand that correctly, Mayor? Mr. President, you verified that the mayor agreed?
I don't know what, the mayor agreed on what?
Oh, Mr. President, through you, may I ask the mayor if he could reiterate what he said about the ARPA funds? Mr. Mayor, in your...
Let's do the amendment.
Understood.
Second, then we'll.
Thank you so much. Yep. My amendment is to amend the McAllister amendment, which is eliminate the judge since the 1.3 million was taken out of the budget. So therefore we don't need a judge, and the 10,000 per ward for a total of $90,000.
Okay, do we have a second? Second by Councilman Howe. I'm Councilman Foley. Go ahead, Councilman.
Thank you,
can ask the
Mr.
mayor.
President. Through the president, Mr. Mayor, did you mentioned earlier about that the ARPA money when we brought up to $10,000 per ward? Could you clarify that comment, as I didn't understand it?
I would ask that be taken out of the ARPA money this year.
So you would add another 10,000 from the ARPA money to each ward to cover the 90,000?
Under the current programs, yes, that we have.
Thank
the ARPA funds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that would be my call. And then, of course, the other one would be the McAllister, to eliminate from the McAllister amendment would be the municipal judge position, since we are not including the funding from the cameras then I don't feel comfortable funding a judge added to the municipal court for the cameras that we are not allowing to include the revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to clarify, so everyone knows what we're voting on right now, it is to cut the municipal court position 15,000 and to cut the, what do we put it in? The $90,000 for the neighborhood projects. So
Highway.
the highway. Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, would I be allowed the latitude to ask the clerk a question? So, Madam Clerk, over the past couple of years, particularly the past year, have you seen an increase in the activity within the municipal court and an additional workload in the municipal court?
We've had an increase in traffic tickets, but
Which brings more people into courtroom, right?
we still see about 40% of the people that appear in court. Like, not everybody appear, they just don't appear. Some people just don't appear. So I can't say yes or no to that, really. We have an increase in traffic tickets, and it depends on who actually shows up in court, if that makes sense.
So is
Right.
the court calendar larger now than it was a year ago? I'm guessing the answer is yes, based upon what Councilwoman Travis has said. And the point that I'm moving to is, up until recently, maybe the past 2 years, maybe 3, maybe a tad longer, we always had 2 municipal court judges, right? We had Judge Gerstenblatt and Judge, I forget what his other name was.
Judge Gerson.
Murphy, Judge Murphy.
No, Judge Murphy was on with Judge McElroy under,
No, Judge McElroy replaced Judge Gerstenblatt.
correct. And it was originally Judge McElroy and Judge Murphy where we had the first 2.
Oh, right,
Judge
right.
Gerstenblatt
That's, so
sat
we
by
had
himself.
2. Okay.
Correct. That's when we had 2 then.
Councilman,
we
I can
went
answer
to
that. They-
just
And then
one.
that,
They split the court session. There wasn't more court time. They alternated back and forth.
Yeah,
Judge-
excuse me,
Judge
Mayor,
Murphy-
there's only one person could speak at a time. So if
So
you have
we
any more
had-
questions for the clerk?
we had 2 judges that we're paying $15,000 a year for, or $12,000 a year, whatever it was.
No, that's incorrect.
What was it?
They split that
7,500?
salary.
It
That
was how
salary
much?
was split between 2 judges.
Which salary? How much?
That-
15,000.
15 split between 2.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor, okay. Councilman Gephardt. Again, we're just talking about the cut of 15,000 for the municipal court position and 90,000 for the public works, highway, general services line item.
All right, thank you. On the position, on the clerk, on the judge position, I would just say we have unfilled positions in the budget already. So just because we allocate a position doesn't mean it has to be hired, or likely, could run into a situation where we need it if the court gets backlogged and it would already be approved. But I can't see the administration going out and, spinning up a new judge just for the heck of it. So to me, it's kind of a non-issue. On the ward projects, I mean, I would, in a lot of ways, I would concur with what Councilman Howe said. Like, you don't want to, some wards get millions of dollars of projects done every year, and we don't want to, pigeonhole ourselves into 10,000. I think these are for the sort of around the edges kind of things, to, get a seat replaced on a swing set or whatever that otherwise might take a while or might not rise up to the top of the priority list. I don't think, I had this concern when we even initiated the program, right? Because it created a new, I don't want to say authority, but a new entitlement to council people to be able to kind of self-direct funds, which is not really how it's worked in the past and likely not how it'll work in the future. So, I mean, I could go either way on that specific part. I mean, I think it's nice to be able to direct, but I think we all work pretty well together. And when there's something important that's impacting your constituents, you can get it done by working with the administration. So, yeah, again, I think ultimately, if the cameras do pass, we do go down this road, there could be a need that this would be proactively sort of getting ahead of, and again, doesn't need to be filled to start with. But I mean, I think the administration has the latitude to, make a move if they need to when the time comes. So, not the most important to me, but I'll hear what others have to say.
Councilman Rex.
I can understand my colleague Councilman Howe's position on these two items. And these are not, I think that these are not the types of items where I have the very strongest opinions on these matters, because either way, if the need arises, it's going to be handled. If we need an additional municipal court judge, then yes, it's going to be funded. If we don't, it's not going to be funded. But as I said earlier, I think that it is fair for us to anticipate the potential need for an expenditure, and that is a little bit different from the potential anticipation, rather the anticipation of a potential source of revenue, where I'm more comfortable anticipating that expenditure and factoring that in as a potential cost rather than factoring in potential revenue. So I am most comfortable with leaving the $15,000 for the municipal court judge position where it is. And I do think that there is merit to having the $90,000 in the operating budget and not simply relying on the ARPA funds. Reason for that is, and I do appreciate the concern that $10,000 per ward does not go very far at all, but I think that Councilman Gebhardt said it well, that these are some intended for some small items around the margin. And I think that we can all appreciate Councilman Howe's concern that we don't want this to be looked at as some sort of a cap or changing how things have been done at the past. In my opinion, a vote for that 10,000 per ward, 90,000 total, would be a matter of additions to, not limitations on what we have been doing in the past in terms of just general improvements around the city. I would also just like to clarify that, and I should have mentioned this earlier during Council President McAllister's amendment, that I do feel strongly that although the fiscal year budget goes from July to June, this isn't the sort of item where I think that it really should follow the calendar year as a matter of practice. So that's not something that we're going to amend or change here in the budget. I'm just encouraging my colleagues that if, whether it's through the ARPA funds or the operating budget, it's something where let's not go and spend that $10,000 before the close of the calendar year. Let's treat it as this is $10,000 for starting in 2025 calendar year. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the Howe amendment, which is, again, to cut the line item for the municipal court by $15,000 and the public works general services line item by $90,000? Okay, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
No.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
No.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
No.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
No.
Mr. Sinapi? Yes. Ms. Travis?
No.
4 yes, 5 no. Amendment fails.
Thank you. Councilman Howe, you still have the floor. Do you have any other amendments at this time? Okay. Councilman Ricks.
Thank you, Council President. I did some math, and bear with me a moment. So we had a discussion during the budget presentations with the fire department, and looking at 4 line items, that is, and this is all on page 28. So first, looking at line items 35-104 and 35-105, that is respectively salaries for Fire 1 and Fire 2. And then similarly looking at line items 35-110 and 35-111, overtime for Fire 1 and Fire 2 respectively. And then also factoring in line item 35-117, sick time, and 35-124, on-job injury. Oh, pardon me, I should just go ahead and propose the amendment, and then I'll discuss. So my proposed amendment would involve cutting $250,000 from line item 35-111, overtime Fire 2, and transferring that $250,000 to the school department, which would be line item 89-000.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Second by Councilman
Second for
Lattiser.
discussion.
Go ahead, Councilman Ricks.
Thank you. The logic here is that looking at the grand total of those 6 different line items, and specifically looking at the 2024 projection for the fire department for fiscal year 2024, the current fiscal year, adding up those 6 items, I get a grand total of $22,789,232. Now, if you add 4% to that, which is greater than, I believe it's a 3.85% contractual increase, so with that additional 0.15%, I'm factoring in some step increases, while also bearing in mind that although there are going to be step increases for some employees, there are also going to be retirements for some employees. And also bearing in mind that as the fire department had presented, the salary line items rely on, that is the salary line items for the 2025 fiscal year proposed budget, rely on the assumption that there aren't retirements, that all of these positions are fully funded, whereas the overtime budgets in line items 35-110 and 111 assume that there will be retirements. You can't have both. So it seems to me that between those total of 6 line items, there is necessarily some overestimation going on there. So when you add up the 2024 fiscal year projections for those 6 line items, and you add 4% to that, you get $23.7 million. In contrast, you add up the 4 line items for the fiscal year 25 projections, and then factor in that you bear in mind that those other 2 line items, the sick time and on-the-job injury line items, those aren't funded for, and as the fire department explained, that's because the other line items are increased to compensate for that. It's built into those 4 line items. Therefore, between those 4 line items, the fiscal year 25 projection for those 4 comes to a total of $24,062,890. So basically, there is an approximate difference between what the request is of the $24,062,000 and the fiscal year 24 projections of $22,789,000 plus 4% to accommodate for those various step increases and 3.85% contractual increase, which would total the 23.7 million. We're looking at a difference of $362,000. So I think that very conservatively, the fire department is over budgeted by $362,000 just based on their own numbers in that manner. And so I think it's reasonable for us to take $250,000. And the reason that I suggest that amount of $250,000 is because the track at Warwick Vets, that weighs in at $500,000. Under President McAllister's earlier amendment, we have $250,000 in a different line item controlled by the city. So if my amendment were to pass, then this would give an additional allocation of $250,000 to the school department, and we would encourage, of course, the school department and the city to work together in good faith to combine each of their $250,000 to cover the replacement of that track at Warwick Vets.
Thank you. Comments on Councilman Rick's amendment? Councilman Lattice.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilman, could you repeat that, please? Yeah, Councilman, I think you know I'm a numbers guy, but I'll tell you, you just threw out a whole lot of numbers. But seriously, I think you make some very good points. Obviously, you've put a lot of thought into this and have analyzed the numbers, I think, very closely and very accurately. As you've heard me say, not just this past Monday night, but for 12 years now, I believe that the overtime line item in the fire department has been over the top and out of control for a very long time, regardless of how many new firefighters they're appropriated, regardless of how many millions of dollars of grants. Let me back up. Millions of dollars of monies to pay for additional firefighters. It doesn't make any difference, because you heard the term again this evening, but I stated it several times this past Monday night. This $4.5 million seems to be the new norm on overtime. And it's being allowed. It's being condoned. And there is no mechanism, or at least there doesn't appear to be any initiative, I should say, to get this under control. I would also add to your comment about the retirees. I don't remember, excuse me, the numbers of recruits that were mentioned the other night that are in the hopper to join the fire department. But I would point out that for every retiree we have in any department, it's a much higher salary than what a new hire or a new recruit is going to be starting at. So I think the math that you've done and the rationale for it is good. The one thing that I would change is to put the $250,000 on our side as opposed to the school department side. And I'll have things to say about that when we get to it. But I would agree with your analysis in your reasoning for making the cut, I would like to see you amend that to bring the 250 on to the city side. But that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Councilman Gephardt.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Councilman. I think it may have been lost in translation because I've heard a couple comments now in regards to it. But the plan with the original 250,000 from the Council President's initial amendment is to put that money into the city side of the budget in the DPW Parks and Recreations line item. And for similar to how we've done with the ARPA projects, for example, Councilman McElroy funded the rehabilitation of a basketball court at a school. So that was a project funded by city side money, executed within on school property. So that's the strategy here. So I think what Councilman Ricks's amendment, and we can ask him to clarify, was to increase that line that we already increased once on the city side of the budget.
Increase it to 5.
Increase it to 500,000. And so I think I would support that. So I'll leave it there.
Any other questions or comments from members who haven't spoken yet? Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Councilman Gebhardt, for that clarification. That's what I was trying to say, but didn't quite say it so accurately. And I understand that we have a new school committee. You know, we have a new superintendent. We have a new assistant superintendent. My history goes back 12 years with the school department. I have very little history with the new leadership or the new school committee. So for me to go from essentially no trust to some trust is going to take some work. It's going to take some effort, and it's going to take some proof. So I like this idea. I like your idea on the 250 initially, Mr. President. I like the idea, assuming Councilman Ricks is speaking to add that 250 to the 5, that the city side will control the 5. School department will benefit, and that's cool, that's fine, but we control it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Ricks, are you going to change your amendment?
I would like to hear from some other members of the council before I decide whether to change the amendment. I think that, certainly if the amendment in its current form pleases the majority of the council, that's something that I would prefer. However, I would certainly be open to Councilman Lattiser's approach as well. But through
so just to clarify, right now, what is before us is to transfer $250,000 from Fire OT2 to the school department.
Correct.
So I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page of what is before us at this time. That's what he proposed.
And through the council president, if I may, perhaps the school committee chair may be able to.
No, I don't want to open it up to. No, we didn't do that last year, so we got to stay consistent that this is a city council budget meeting. You know, they're going to tell us that they'll. I would like to keep it just between the council and the city side because it's ultimately our thing. There is a question here. Well, before us right now, we just have the straight transferring of $250,000 overtime to the school department. I'd like to get the mayor's thoughts on the amendment. We'll see if the amendment goes forward, and then go to Councilman Sinapi. So, Mayor, your thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm adamantly opposed to this. I don't want to take money out of the overtime account for the fire department. What if we need it? We have to think about public safety. I'm adamantly opposed to this. Comes up every year. Thank you.
He's against,
I'm
the
sorry,
amendment.
you might need another one. This one's bad. Okay. I'm adamantly opposed to it. Taking $250,000 out of the overtime fund is reckless to public safety. We may need it. It has to be there. That's why we put it there. We hope we don't have to use it, but I mean, we could have incidents over the summer that we'd need the coverage, we need the overtime for. It's just, it's not a good idea. Thank you.
Councilman Sinapi.
So I would urge Councilman Ricks to switch the source of the transfer, or rather the recipient line item, just because it sounds like at least several of us on this side of the room would be more inclined to support it if it went to the DPW line item and echoed Councilman Gebhardt's strategy, as opposed to the verbiage of the current amendment. And I'd rather see it pass, given that it obviously supports the schools and supports something in dire need of being fixed.
Councilman Foley.
In the hope of brevity, I agree with Councilman Sinapi and would support that way and not as currently proposed.
Thank you. Any other questions or
Could
comments?
you ask Councilman Sinapi to repeat that, please? I didn't get it, what he said. Sorry.
Councilman Sinapi?
I thought you were messing with me at first. No, I said that I urged Councilman Ricks to switch where the money was going to what Councilman Gebhardt suggested, because it seemed like several of us on this side of the room would support it if it mirrored what Councilman Gebhardt said, as opposed to the current verbiage of the amendment, which gave the money directly to the schools. Mirroring Councilman Gebhardt's strategy.
Councilman Ricks?
Thank you, Council President. After hearing from our colleagues, Councilman Lattiser, Sinapi, and Foley, if there is no objection, I would move to amend my motion such that the $250,000 from line item 35-111 would instead go to line item line item 70-281, the same line item for which funding was increased by $250,000 per your earlier amendment.
Okay, any objection to Councilman Ricks changing his amendment? Okay, so no objections, right? Yeah, so it's already been seconded, so no objection. So the new Rick's amendment is $250,000 from fire overtime 2 into the public works, field maintenance, and materials. Any questions or comments? Councilman Howe.
Just please, we're moving 250, the proposal, the amendment is move 250,000 from fire still?
From fire overtime, correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other additional questions or comments on the Rick's amendment? Okay, and the mayor, he's in the same position as he was before. Okay. The clerk will call roll for favorable action on the Rick's amendment.
McAllister?
No.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
No.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy?
No.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi?
Yes.
Ms. Travis?
Yes.
6 yes, 3 no, amendment passes.
Okay, amendment passes. Councilman Ricks, you still have the floor. Do you have any other amendments to propose at this time?
Thank you. Let's see. My next amendment involves increasing the tax collection rate from 99.2% to 99.5%, being approximately $700,000, and transferring those additional funds into the asphalt budget 63-290, increasing that line item from 80,000 to approximately 780,000.
Okay, do we have a second to Ricks's amendment?
Could I ask him to repeat that, please?
Sure. Repeat the amendment, please. And
Certainly. It would increase the anticipated tax collection rate from 99.2 to 99.5%, and that would generate approximately $700,000, pending the more specific numbers from the finance director. And any proceeds from that anticipated increase going to line item 63-290 asphalt, increasing it from 80,000 to approximately 780,000.
Okay, do we have a second to the Ricks
I'll
amendment?
second for discussion.
Second by Councilman Lattiser. Go ahead, Councilman Ricks.
Thank you. There have been some previous years where the city has realized 99.5% collection rates. I think that while revenue is difficult to predict, I think that it is possible for those numbers to be hit, especially since there are sales of tax titles and otherwise consistency with recent years in the past, although those numbers do, of course, fluctuate. But the reason that I want to move those funds into the asphalt budget in particular is because paving is something that's important across all 9 wards. It's something that I have a concern that in future fiscal years, as various costs, be they contractual, long-term liabilities such as pension and health care, including retiree health insurance, OPEB, as well as various other costs, and the nature of ARPA funds as one-time funds, as all of those tend to put pressure on the budget. I don't want paving to get left by the wayside. This current fiscal year, paving funds would consist of $80,000 under the proposed budget, as well as $420,000 in ARPA funds. My concern is that if we do not start to increase that baseline, then in future years, as budgets get tighter, then as has tended to happen under previous mayors in the past, paving tends to be something that's more easily put on the chopping block. But if we have a number that's a little bit higher, and granted, 780,000 is certainly nothing anywhere near enough to address the annual paving needs of the city. But if we bake in that number as a baseline, then it becomes easier to try to maintain that number in future years. And I think that it's reasonable to engage in this attempt, factoring in the potential anticipated revenue if we were to reach 99.5%.
Thank you. Councilman Lattiser.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. With all due respect, Councilman Ricks, I'm not going to be able to support this. I think that it is also a lean towards anticipated income. I think that given the significant increases in financial burden to the taxpayers, I think it's possible, it could be, waving a magic wand and hoping that you'll get to 99.5 or 6 or 7. And to some degree, I might have to even compare that to the revenue for the speed cameras. I think it would be a bit dangerous, just going by my personal business experience, to take a swing at that type of assumption and then commit the money to something else, knowing that, and I should say not knowing if you're going to get it. So in other words, I take the assumption that I'm going to increase my profits by $300,000. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to buy a couple of new pickup trucks and, some other equipment. But then $300,000 in profit doesn't show. I think it's risky. I think it's a risky business venture. And for those reasons, this one, I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to support you on this one. Thank you.
Mr. President, I could shed some light on this. Councilman, you're looking at the paving line item under DPW, which is $80,000. That money is for fixing potholes, cracks, things like that. Under the highway department, we have budgeted $2.3 million for paving. And that doesn't include the money that will be coming in throughout the year for reimbursements from Rhode Island Grid and the grant we got through the state program last year. Honestly, we have more money right now than we can possibly pave this year. We have both companies out there, and you could put $10 million in there. We can't pave any more than we are. And it doesn't carry over to next year. It goes into the fund balance we reallocate.
Councilman Ricks.
If I may, pardon me, I didn't quite hear the line item for paving.
The line item for paving, I don't have that in this one, Lynn. It's under DPW Highway Department. It's on page 3 of the capital improvements budget.
Mr. President, while we're looking for that, may I make a quick comment?
Councilman Ladders.
Thank you. I would reflect back to the budget hearing, because I had questioned that item, and I had asked why in the fiscal year 2025 there was no money in the paving. And the answer was, whatever we have left from this year will be moved into the paving for the upcoming fiscal year. So I don't think the number is a hard and fast number, Mayor, with all due respect of 2.3 million, because what was said Monday night when I challenged that, or questioned that, I should say, is whatever we have left in paving at the end of this year, we're going to move into paving. So that's kind of a moving target.
Well, yes, the reimbursement money and all that, what the city specifically allocates would be done. But as I said, we have grant money from the state. We got the $4 million last year, and it's ARPA money, and Lynn can probably explain it better.
I'm just making the point as to what was testified to on Monday.
Right.
Okay.
Right. But as I said, adding any money to that $80,000 does no good, because that's potholes, cracks, and it's more than enough money to do that. So as I said, we have a lot of money to pave.
Any other questions or comments on the Ricks amendment? Okay, so before us, the Ricks amendment, which was proposed and seconded, is to change the collection rate from 99.2 to 99.5, which would bring in an additional $700,000 and move that money into the asphalt line item. Any additional questions or comments on the Ricks amendment? Okay, hearing none, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
No.
Mr. Foley?
No.
Mr. Gephardt?
No.
Mr. Howe?
No.
Mr. Lattiser?
No.
Mr. McElroy?
No.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? No. Ms. Travis?
No.
1 yes, 8 no, amendment fails.
Okay, amendment fails. Councilman Ricks?
My next amendment would seek to close the structural deficit through a tax increase. In particular, it would increase the tax rate by approximately 1.92% from a proposed 1.48 to an amended proposal of 3.40% approximately, in order to raise the pardon me one moment to double check the numbers here. Yes, in order to raise the approximate amount of $4.47 million in order to close the total structural deficit.
Okay. One more time, the amendment, we'll get a second, and then discussion.
Oh, certainly. I'll repeat briefly. So the proposed amendment would increase the tax rate from the current proposal of increasing it by 1.48%, increase it by another 1.92% for a grand total of a 3.4% increase.
Okay, do we have a second?
Mr. President.
Oh, Solicitor Walsh.
So I just want to clarify the amendment. Councilman, you're seeking to essentially negate the drawdown on the rainy day fund and
Correct.
add it to the levy? Is that the general intent?
Correct.
Okay, so just as a running tally for everyone, we've already added, we need to, the amendments adopted already have added 1.7 million to the levy. So this would be, just so everyone's clear, the amendment that Councilman Ricks would be proposing would be to eliminate the fund drawdown balance in 100,03690, which is in the amount of $2.65135 million, and add that to the running total on the levy increase, correct?
Well, I understand on the mayor's proposed budget, the drawdown from the fund balance, and that precise line item is 100-03690 on page 63.
Correct.
Under the mayor's proposed budget, the fund balance drawdown was, according to my papers, $2,765,135. However, that had been increased by an additional 1.7 million by our earlier amendments.
No, the McAllister Amendment number 1 did not add to the rainy day fund. It added to the levy on property taxes. So the line item in the fund drawdown is still exists as proposed by the mayor, $2,765,135. So just wanted to clarify, the amendment that you're proposing, or at least the intent, is to eliminate use of the rainy day fund and add that amount to the additional tax levy.
Correct, which would be an increase of 1.18%. Pardon my mix-up on that point.
Okay, do we have a second to that? Second by Councilman Lattiser for discussion.
For discussion.
Go ahead, Councilman Ricks.
So I don't necessarily expect this to go any better than my last amendment. However, for the same reasons that I have concerns about rising costs in future years, whether the source of that is the combination of contractual commitments, present and future, rising liabilities when it comes to OPEB, as well as healthcare for active workers, and otherwise the effects of inflation and all of the other commitments that the city has, including the bonds. Those commitments when it comes to bonds, those are going to increase. In the future, we can anticipate that the schools are going to need additional funds, and therefore, especially with the ARPA funds running out, I don't think that this is the right year for us to be running a structural deficit. I think that closing the structural deficit, although painful as it is this year, I think it would be wise to make this move now and prevent us from having greater pain with greater tax increases or necessary cuts to service in those future years, as all of those different factors come together to put us in a much more difficult position in perhaps not next year, perhaps the year after that, and the year after that. The next several years, I anticipate, are going to be difficult due to all of those factors. And I think that if we have a little bit more pain now, it's going to save us from having that particularly sharp pain in future years. That's all. Thank you.
Councilman Gephardt.
Just a quick note on this. I think we are in large part already accomplishing this with the council president's first amendment, in that we are removing the uncertainty around a significant portion of revenue from the budget, adding it to the levy. So we've already increased the levy slightly. It gives us the opportunity for tailwinds should the camera program move forward. And we know from watching this administration budget for the last 4 years, they, I won't say sandbag, but they like to be conservative and leave open the opportunity for positive things to happen. We know we've got a lot of new housing coming online. We know we have a lot of investment happening in the city. And so there's other opportunities to make up the delta. We started this year with a $7-ish million drawdown from the rainy fund. We're going to finish around $2 million. So they've done a good job to pinch pennies, and this council's supported them in that in those efforts. So I don't think we need to go to the extreme of eliminating the entirety of the structural deficit. Just knowing how these folks think about budgeting, they are very conservative when it comes to revenues and very conservative when it comes to expenses. And so I think we'll be in good shape here. So I will not support this one, and I'm happy with where we're at.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so everyone knows, I have no problem with making a second on anyone's motion, because particularly during this budget process, I believe that every one of us put a lot of time and a lot of effort into analyzing these things, doing research from previous budgets, and in some cases, going back maybe 28 or more years on budgets, researching 30. So that's the reason why I will be seconding things. I think everyone should have an opportunity to discuss that. However, I will not be able to support this, Councilman Ricks. I don't think that the answer to reducing or helping to close the structural deficit is to add additional burden to the taxpayers. I believe the answer to reducing the structural deficit is to reduce the spending. The spending is out of control, and it's going to continue to do so unless this city council or a future city council decides to operate it from a business perspective. So I can't support sharing or shifting the burden of this structural deficit onto the taxpayers. I think what we need to do going forward is to make every effort possible and reduce the spending, reel in the costs, work more efficiently, and simply cut spending. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll ask the solicitor, would this bring us over the 4% cap anyways, meaning would have to go before the State House.
By quick math, I believe it would raise us from roughly, we're probably sitting in a 2.2 something range right now. We certainly defer to the administration
It's
of
the
where.
same math we just did. It would put us over the 4% cap. And I'm opposed to it in every other way, shape, and form.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, any other questions or comments on the Ricks amendment? Okay, hearing none, the clerk will call a roll for favorable action.
McAllister?
No.
Mr. Foley?
No.
Mr. Gephardt?
No.
Mr. Howe?
No.
Mr. Lattiser?
No.
Mr. McElroy?
No.
Mr. Ricks?
No. Or excuse me, yes.
Mr. Sinapi?
Was that a quick reconsideration?
A little bit of sleep deprivation.
No.
Ms. Travis? 1 yes, 8 no. Amendment
Thank you.
fails.
The amendment fails. Councilman Ricks.
No further amendments at this time.
Thank you. Councilman Foley.
Before I make my proposed amendment, I have some questions for the finance director. Is that appropriate?
You got to make an amendment, get a second, and then we can open it up for discussion.
All right. I have an amendment.
Go right ahead.
In line 100, 03690, fund balance drawdown. The proposed drawdown for 2025 is $2,765,135. I would like to increase that by 1.3. That's the amount that was taken out of the revenue for the traffic cams, for better terminology.
Okay, do we have a second? Second by Councilman
For discussion.
Lattiser for discussion. Go ahead, Councilman.
Could I ask some questions of
Yes.
the finance director?
Or the mayor, whoever.
Or the mayor?
Well, actually,
As I'm reading.
Councilman Foley, I was going to make this amendment later. So
I'm sorry, sir.
Actually, I was going to make this amendment later.
Oh.
So
Oh.
I'm glad you did it. So go ahead and ask any questions.
Great minds think alike, sir.
And yours and mine too. Would you like to ask it of Peter Schaefer?
Well, if you can probably answer it. I just,
Okay.
point of clarification. In the revised 2024, that line item.
Councilman Foley, can you just go into the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I thought it was me.
The proposed drawdown or revised on that line was $7,109,000 roughly. The projected 2024 is 1.363.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
I'm reading off the.
Let me bring the expert up.
Okay, thank you.
And I think he might be able to hear you better than I can too.
Yep, that's right there. See.
In 25, the figure is 2,765,000.
Well, my question,
You
Mr.
would have to
Schaefer.
increase that by,
No, I'm sorry. My question was, for this current year, we had proposed 7.1, and we only drew down 1.3. Yeah, right. But is that pretty, you feel confident that's a close number? Yeah, okay. So my rationale, if I may now, Council President, my rationale is by doing it this way, we accomplish what the mayor has said about not increasing the levy on the taxpayers of Warwick. If we hear testimony and we agree and we pass the traffic cams, I'm just trying to use the easiest terminology, and we generate that 1.3 million from the traffic cams, then we can just reduce the drawdown like we did this year. So that's my rationale for making that amendment to that line item.
Any questions or comments on the Foley amendment? Hold on one second. We got a couple of people, and then I'll let them. Well, Mayor, your thoughts on the amendment as proposed?
Your turn.
Got a red light, Phil. Sorry about that. Yeah, Phil's going to get it. I'm in favor of the drawdown of 1.3 because it accomplishes the same thing. If the cameras, as I anticipate, is brought in its undesignated money, it goes immediately to the fund balance. Another problem is maybe on another amendment, and maybe Councilman Foley would like to offer that one. This doesn't make everything whole because you've had some different other expenses here to the school department and whatnot. And I would ask that you amend it to that would come from ARPA funds, since they are one-time funds. And it wouldn't affect our budget. Correct, Peter? Peter?
I'm okay with the proposed, what the mayor just proposed, if my colleagues are.
Oh, hold on, we got to follow it now. All right, so before us is the Foley amendment, which is to add 1.3 million into the rainy day fund. You would like to withdraw that and then add another amendment?
Using the wording that the mayor just.
I would think it would be two separate. One, just to increase the drawdown from the fund balance by 1.3%. That would offset, I don't know the terminology, disallowing the anticipated revenue. It would offset it without putting an additional burden on the taxpayers this year.
So Councilman Foley, what's your pleasure right now? So right now you have a motion to add $1.3 million to the rainy day fund. It's been seconded. You can make a motion after this if you
All right,
want.
well, let's just keep it where it is.
Okay. So just before us now is adding an additional $1.3 million into the line item I'm calling the rainy day fund. Councilman Sinapi.
So this accomplishes my goal, at least in part. Obviously, based on what the mayor said, we're going to have to do a little bit more, but at least this gets us towards not doing an unnecessary increase in the tax levy. Because I still think it's silly not to acknowledge projected revenue no matter the source, especially considering it's well documented. This is better than me instead having to point out myself and others will probably vote no on the budget and go for a veto. So yeah, I support this.
So to me, this is just simply moving the stone under a different shell. I don't think it's really changed a whole lot. We're still drawing down from the savings account to fund something that may or may not happen. But that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilman Ricks.
I understand it's a different method from what was proposed in Councilman Snappy's amendment. However, I see it as very similar in that it has effectively the same effect. I don't want to be presuming that type of revenue here. So unfortunately, I would have to vote no on this. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from members of the council? Okay, so before us is the Foley amendment to add $1.3 million back into the rainy day fund. No, I'm sorry, increase.
Just so I understand the amendment, Councilman, so we are drawing down additional funds from the rainy day fund to offset the commensurate amount with that's currently being put on the levy of $1.3 million. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's what he said. Okay, the clerk will call the roll for favorable action on the Foley amendment.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
No.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
No.
Mr. Sinapi? Yes. Ms. Travis?
No.
5 yes, 1 no, amendment passes.
Councilman Foley. You still have the floor. Do you have any more amendments?
May I ask? No, I have to propose the amendment. I'm good for now. Thank you.
Any other council members have amendments? Councilman Gephardt.
Similar to the last amendment, I would like to make an amendment to decrease the drawdown by $650,000. So I'll split the difference with you fully, but we are going to depend.
Let me just get a second.
Oh, yeah.
So second on Councilman Gephardt's, second by Councilman Lattiser for discussion. Go ahead, Councilman Gephardt.
Could you speak into the mic a little better
Yes.
so I can hear you?
Yes. So, we are going to enter into territory in the next 4 to 5 years where we are likely going to depend on the fund balance to help us navigate through the short-term borrowing costs related to the high school, and as well as other things that come up. And we were very fortunate in this year's budget that, we estimated a high drawdown and we ended up with a low drawdown where, one of these years we're going to roll snake eyes. So I think we could diminish the burden on the tax base. This would get us to, if we draw down half of the amount that you're proposing, it'd probably get us to just under a 2% tax increase or right thereabouts. And we can bank the rest on, increased funding coming from new programs or new taxes or new business, ventures or new fees or wherever the revenue is going to come from, but without putting all of our chips on the fund balance. So that's my amendment.
Councilman Foley.
Through the chair to my colleague, the only reason I don't agree to that compromise, and I know we're going back and forth, is this: the way I proposed it, if we do not need to draw down that much, that money automatically stays in the rainy day fund. Yet by drawing down that much, more money stays in the taxpayer's pocket. If we go your route as proposed, and I think it's a legitimate proposal, but if we go your route, we're taking the money out of the taxpayer's pocket. And if we don't need to draw down, there's no way to give it back to the taxpayer. If we don't need to draw down as much as I proposed in the rainy day fund, we can't give it back to the taxpayers. It just goes to the rainy day fund. By going the way I proposed, it stays in the taxpayer's pocket first and then gets reimbursed into the rainy day fund. That's my logic behind what I proposed. Thank you.
Ricks.
I'm going to suggest here that it is expensive when you don't have money. So what that means for people in their own lives is when you don't have money and you get hit by an unexpected expense, then you might have to borrow the money. Who do you borrow it from? You end up paying more, and you go through a lot of time and hassle just to make sure that the bills are getting paid, make sure that the car keeps running, that you're getting those groceries. We see it all the time. How many Americans just don't have money for emergencies? And that's also why it's always a concern to me when it comes to raising taxes. Have to factor that in. But the same is true of the city. It's expensive when the city doesn't have money available either. We're taking out a lot of bonds for a lot of different purposes, including the purpose of building 2 new high schools and continuing to pay bonds for those 80 million plus in repairs to the elementary and middle schools, other bonds on top of that. We don't want the fund balance to keep decreasing, and then that hurts the city's bond rating, just like an individual, their credit rating can get hit, and then it becomes more expensive for that individual, where the same things that that individual could do if they had a higher credit rating suddenly are out of reach when that credit rating drops, when they don't have that money available. We don't want that to happen to the city. So with all due respect, of course, to the concept of, to the extent that we possibly can, keep that money in the taxpayers' pockets, we have to be concerned about balancing the city's budget. As it is, the proposed budget was initially $2.7 million as a structural deficit. As I referred to earlier, I think that for a lot of reasons, this is not the year that we should be running a structural deficit. And so after that, the last amendment, which tends to deepen the structural deficit, I feel that Councilman Gebhardt's motion is putting us back a little bit in the right direction here. I'm not going to let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think that it is a good idea for us to do what we can to make sure that that structural deficit is a little bit more manageable, that we start to bridge that gap a little bit and not move in the wrong direction here of the things that are in the long term ultimately going to cost the city more, which ultimately costs all of the taxpayers more in the long term. For those reasons, I'm going to support Councilman Gebhardt's amendment.
Okay, any other council members? Mayor, do you have an opinion on this amendment? So before us is to decrease the line item by $650,000?
Yes, this would, we would reduce the drawdown on the rainy day fund and by half of the prior amendment and add that back to the levy.
Okay. Mayor?
Yeah, I want to start by saying we didn't draw down $5 million less by being lucky. It was management by our administration. The management we've demonstrated over the past 3 years. I wouldn't have proposed the numbers we did if we weren't confident in them, and we've been correct so far. Now, the residents of Warwick, I've been around here a long time. They are not all IT guys that live in Cohasset, rich contractors. They work for the chamber or attorneys. Some of these people live in Oakland Beach, Connecticut. They're single parents, they're old people. Every penny counts to them. I want to put no further burden on them than we don't have to. We're talking about 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Next year, and the General Assembly may very well decide that they are going to reimburse us on the schools as we go. Anything can happen. I was anticipating revenue. I was told, no, we have to deal with what's before us now. You want to raise taxes now in anticipation of situations we may face 4 or 5 years from now. My mission here is to put the least burden on the taxpayers who are struggling right now. A lot of these people can't buy bread. They can't pay for health care. They can't pay for child care. So I don't want to put one more dime on their backs that they don't have to have right now. No more burden.
Any other questions or comments from members of the council?
Fund balance, it's a few cents.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions or comments on the Gebhardt amendment? Councilman Lattiser.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's been an interesting discussion on this one, and in the spirit of compromise, I may even support this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from members of the council? Okay, hearing none, the proposal has been proposed and seconded to decrease that line item by 650 and put it towards the levy. The clerk will call the roll for favorable action.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
No.
Mr. Gebhardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
No.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
No.
Mr. Ricks,
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi, Ms. Travis.
I'm going to say yes.
5 yes, 4 no, amendment passes.
Thank you. The amendment passes. Councilman Gephardt, you still have the floor. Okay. Okay. Any other amendments at this time from members of the council? Councilman Howe.
I don't want to go out of, I already proposed an amendment, and since I proposed an amendment, Mr. President and Solicitor, a lot of money has moved around from accounts. And I think now with the open mind, I don't know if I have to recall because I was on the losing side of the vote or reconsideration, or do I just propose another amendment, Solicitor?
What is it that you're seeking to do?
It'll be the exact same, it'll probably be in addition to the amendment, so it should be an amendment. I was going to request that we eliminate the judge of 15,000 since once again, the cameras, the estimated of the cameras are not in the budget, as well as eliminate the ward $10,000 per ward, 90,000 total. So take that $105,000. Originally, I was going to request, Mr. President, that it goes back into the overtime for fire, because I do adamantly agree with the mayor that public safety is a priority. But I think because of the vote we just did, just to help a little ease the levy, the tax levy we're about to put on the taxpayers, I'd like to eliminate those. And with a second, I'll explain why.
First, I just want to confirm, now we've already voted on this amendment for those two items from the councilman.
The prior amendment that Mr. Howe offered was to eliminate those two new additions. The original amendment that he did was to included the property tax to reduce the increase to the tax levy. So, Councilman, you want to? This new amendment is to take that $105,000 and direct it where?
I apologize, Solicitor, I was speaking loud. So I am basically asking for reconsideration of the amendment that on the vote that I lost.
If it's the prior amendment, you were on the losing side and don't have the authority to reconsider when you're on the losing party.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
You were on the losing side, so you can't ask
Your
for.
prior amendment failed. You were on the losing side, so you can't reconsider.
Thank you.
No other amendment.
Point of order. I think we changed that rule.
We changed the seconding, I believe.
Yeah, I believe anyone can second it. But we'll check. We'll
All right,
check.
yeah, let's just check before I don't want
Yeah.
unduly to.
Yes, it was Lattice's fault.
Okay.
Rule 27 continues to read, when a vote has been passed, it shall be in order for any member voting with the prevailing side to move the reconsideration thereof. The prior item eliminated the necessity that the seconder also be part of that prevailing side.
I didn't hear.
Can't do it. Councilman Snappy.
So, Councilman Howe, you might be able to do this too. So, my motion before was to raise it for the revenue line item, was to raise it to back to the original 1.3. I'm going to do the same thing, 1.3 and $1. It's a different motion. And I request a second. And I have a pretty good rationale for it.
Councilman Lattiser.
I got to stick with it.
Go ahead. It's been seconded by Councilman Lattiser. Go ahead, Councilman Snappy.
So as of now, because the proposal overarching proposal is to raise taxes more than necessary, given that we are ignoring a projected revenue, even though projections are literally what the budget is based on, I will vote no on the overall budget, and I don't believe I am alone on that. And the mayor has already indicated he is inclined to potentially veto the budget if the taxes are raised more than necessary. So my proposal is, again, to renew the projected revenue from the cameras plus $1 That way, we do not risk a veto, or rather, that way we have a veto-proof majority, because the alternative is to not have that, potentially have the budget vetoed, and we all get to come back and do this again until we can agree. So again, to summarize, we can acknowledge reasonably projected revenue that is incredibly conservative by all accounts, or we can ignore reasonably projected revenue, which is mind-boggling because of all the other projections in the budget that we are acknowledging, some of which have no basis other than just pure speculation, and risk a veto and increase taxes more than necessary just because. So those are your options.
Any questions or comments on the Sinapi amendment? Councilman Gephardt.
I would offer that it is your opinion that it's raising taxes more than zero. We have a multi-million-dollar structural deficit. So technically we should raise taxes by all of that or spend less. So I'll just leave that there.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm simply parroting what the mayor stated, and which I'm inclined to agree with, because if that was the rationale we were going to use, we would use it every time we were here as far as the structural deficit. That's not a new issue.
Other questions or comments? Councilman Rex.
To make sure that we're all on the same page here, and as there have been several amendments that affect the tax rate, where does the budget with its amendments currently stand as to the increase in the tax rate? It's my understanding that the mayor's proposed budget would involve a 1.48% tax increase, but I want to make sure that I'm understanding where that number stands as of right now with the current amendments.
So I'm happy to compare notes with the finance team over there, but the First Amendment added 1.7 million to the levy. The Eighth Amendment reduced by 1.3 million, so the running total would be 400,000 increase to the levy. The subsequent amendment corrected part of that, or addressed part of that, and brought it back by $650,000. So per my math, the running total to the increase to the levy is $1,050,000. And I'm happy to compare notes as far as a status check there.
I think this is, the 400,000 is the issue, because you added 400,000 in expenditures, the very first amendment. That's not been changed. So the most recent amendment increased the levy by 650. And so I would say that we don't have a balanced budget by $400,000.
The amendment that was just adopted split the difference. So there was a removal of it from municipal court fines initially that added it to the levy along with the new expenditures. Amendment 1 added 1.7 million to the levy.
Yes.
Then we had two amendments that addressed the same issue. One was undoing 1.3 million and the other adding back 650,000.
Right, but you haven't mentioned the 1.7 covered the 1.3 plus the $400,000 in additional expenditures, and I haven't.
My running tally of additional expenditures is the 400 plus 650, so $1,050,000 is the current additional levy.
Yes, that would be correct.
The running total
Yes,
of what
yes.
we're shifting to the levy.
All right. Yes, okay, I'm fine with that.
And now we have an amendment before us that
I'm
would,
fine with the numbers add up. That doesn't mean the mayor's going to support this.
and just to be clear, now the running.
So that was Councilman Rick's question. So you still have the floor, Councilman Ricks. You have the floor.
It's my thought process that in the event that this budget actually comes down to a 5-4 vote and it becomes subject to a mayoral veto, then there would be a separate hearing in which the 9 of us would have the opportunity, regardless of it, whether this budget ultimately passed 5-4, 6-3, or by any other number, to vote on the budget once again. So unless I'm misunderstanding Councilman Sinapi on this point, I don't think that a concern about a mayoral veto is something that we should necessarily be factoring in at this particular time.
My opinion on that is this is the council meeting, this is the council budget, and I think we should vote on how we think it should go. And the mayor is on the administration, we're the council. And, I think you should vote your conscience and vote what you think is best. And we'll see what happens, what happens. I don't see how a potential event from someone that we can't, that has nothing to do with us. That's not a vote right now. There's the 9 of us that are voting on this. So, Councilman Ladison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will not be supporting this. I am not in fear of a mayoral veto. I can remember back several years ago when we had 4 vetoes come to us at one meeting, and we overrode all 4 vetoes. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But that's why they do what they do, and we do what we do. But I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
I think there's also a question of whether doing it this way is consistent with how the charter is written as well, which could also be taken into effect. So,
If that's going to be claimed, then I request a ruling by the chair.
Councilman, hold on one second.
Point of, I request a ruling by the chair if that's going to be raised. Rule 1.
Councilman, I don't understand. What are you asking?
Request a ruling by the chair on an issue, and if this is one that has to be decided on, and if it's going to be raised as a basis to potentially vote no, then I want a ruling on it. The chair is empowered to rule, and depending on your ruling, I may request an appeal to the greater council. Greater council? Full council, sorry.
I don't think anyone has raised that. I just made a statement.
You just did. You can't raise it and not stand by it. You got to go one way or another. If it's going to be raised as a potential issue, then I would request a ruling on it. And it has been raised as a potential issue. So again, I request a ruling on it.
So I will look to the council solicitor to explain.
Asking rule 1 from the chair, make a decision from the chair.
Councilman Sinapi, are you asserting that the amendment that you've offered is violative of the charter? Or are you challenging your own amendment?
No, a
Then
point was raised that it may be against the charter. I am challenging that point, which may or may not defeat the amendment. I acknowledge that. But what I want people to do is to vote yes or no based on facts, not based on maybes.
we do not currently have a motion that your amendment violates the charter. So unless someone's going to assert it, we're going to move forward on your amendment.
It's a point of order. Shall decide all questions and points of order. This was a point of order that has been raised to the chair. I don't need to make a motion. Rule 1, second paragraph. First sentence.
The point of order comes to me, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
So you're looking for me to rule your amendment out of order. That's what you're looking for.
Whether or not it is out of order per the charter.
Okay. Well, first, I just think that we've already voted on this. This is just, 1.3 million plus $1. I think we've all given our positions on this as well. I do think there's a question on this. I didn't offer it earlier. People were throwing out, they were worried about what the mayor might do. So I mentioned that as well. So I do believe there could be questions on the way that this was done through the charter. I think a straight up vote on your amendment should be what we will do. I understand that you're allowed to make this point of order and try and do that. I just think we've already voted on this, and I'm willing to just take the vote on it and see where it goes. But I do think you've asked, so I do think the way that the charter interprets this, I think they expected something like this, the way it's written, that something like this could come on it. So that's why they have that particular provision.
So in that case, may I ask a question of the administration rather than have you rule?
Well, again, this is the council meeting. I don't know why the administration is weighing in on, they can't vote.
I know they've weighed in on everything though, so.
Mr. President,
No,
I'm
not
No,
ready.
Mr. President.
Excuse me, Mayor, this is a council meeting.
You can gavel all you want.
Council-
Under 3-10 of the city charter. I
Mayor
am allowed to
Picozzi,
speak at
you are
all,
out of order
please.
right now, please.
I'm not out
Let
of
us, we are conducting a meeting right now. I will get to you. You've been able to speak the entire time. I will give you that.
As allowed by charter.
As well.
As
You're
allowed by
not a
charter.
member of the council, so excuse me. So please.
Article 3.10 of the city charter. It's
You
a
are
good
not
read. Open
recognized.
it up.
You are out of order. You will be recognized at the appropriate time. So we're back to the motion.
And
Solicitor
as
Walsh.
part of the motion, just like we've done for every other motion, I have a
Solicitor Walsh,
question.
please.
Solicitor Walsh, just so I'm clear, just to make sure what I'm saying is getting across, because I'm not sure it is. I just have a question for the administration about my motion, just like we've had with all the other motions. Nothing different or crazy.
the mayor has the ability to speak in front of the council at the call of the chair. When the president recognizes him, he'll be able to speak. So there's no issue on that.
Makes sense.
We just want to make sure we're all aware of where we're at, what's before us. So we have a question being raised, as a point of order being raised by Councilman Sinapi on his amendment of whether it is violative of the charter. We can hear the administration's perspective as it relates to, I'm sorry, I was speaking like, we can hear the administration's perspective as to why they justify what they did or not, as it relates to, does it meet section 520? And they can speak to that, but we're going to proceed immediately back to the chair or the president at this time, after that, who will rule, and then we can proceed. So
That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Just to bring everyone back to where we are, is the charter provision 520, anticipated new revenue, cites no new revenue from a source not previously stated in the budget shall be included unless the mayor and the director of finance shall determine that the facts clearly warrant the expectation that such revenue shall be actually realized in cash during the fiscal year in the amount stated, and shall certify such determination in writing to the council. I don't believe anyone is challenging the written portion. There was a budget message as well as numbers that back that up. So it's really on the other piece of it is I think where Councilman Sinapi is challenging it, and so it would be in order to recognize the mayor and back to the chair for his ruling.
Mayor Picozzi.
Thank you, Mr. President. I apologize for raising my voice to you. Could you repeat the question, Councilman? It's been a while.
So the possibility was raised by the chair that the amendment was violative of when it comes to the section that the solicitor spoke of. I just wanted the administration to weigh in as to whether or not they felt it was violative and why. That way people on the council can vote yay or nay on the overall amendment based on the facts rather than based on speculation.
My solicitors interpreted the charter differently than Solicitor Walsh has. I naturally agree with my solicitor. We couldn't have him here tonight because I didn't know how the conversation was going to go. In a perfect world, we'd adjourn here and bring back the other solicitors so you could hear both sides. I was willing to abide by your solicitor's opinion on this and let the council have the say. I don't want to be in violation of the charter, and neither do you. I could be violating the charter by leaving it up to you. I'm not sure. I'm not an attorney.
All right. I mean, from my perspective, the administration provided it in writing and certified it already. So for me, it's an easy call, but take that as you will.
So on the point of order, the council president, what say you as it relates to the amendment being inconsistent with the charter?
Again, I do agree with that. I do believe this amendment is inconsistent with the charter. It talks about how it clearly warrants the expectation that such revenue shall be actually realized in cash during the fiscal year. This has not come before the city council. It has not been proposed. It has not been voted on. We don't have the research. We don't know who the vendor is going to be. We don't know how many cameras. We don't know where the cameras are going to be. We don't know the timeline. All these things we will know down the line if it comes before us. But tonight, we don't have that information. So I didn't want to get into a charter dispute on this, but as the chair, I was asked, and that was the motion. So yes, I believe that this is in violation of the charter.
Just so you know, I said I would withdraw that if the administration spoke, so you actually didn't have to rule. But given that you did, I now will appeal to the majority of to the full council under Rule 1.
Councilman Sinapi is appealing the ruling of the chair. If a yes vote would sustain the chair's ruling that this amendment is out of order, a no vote would enable the amendment to be back before us.
Okay, the clerk will call the roll. So a yes vote is the is out of order.
There's no discussion.
There's
on
no
it.
discussion
This
on
is-
the point of
This
order.
is, shall the opinion of the chair be sustained? The opinion of shall the president's ruling that this amendment is out of order be sustained? A yes makes the amendment out of order. A no would allow it to be brought back.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
No.
Mr. Gephardt?
No.
Mr. Howe?
No.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy? Mr. Riggs?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Mr. Sinapi?
I got confused because the chair voted yes. So which one sustains?
A yes vote is with the ruling of the chair, which the amendment is out of order.
So no then.
Yes.
Okay, so now, Councilman, go ahead, Solicitor Walsh.
Did anybody want to change it?
Motion is not made out of order, so Mr. Sinapi is able to make.
So the amendment's before us.
All right, and now it is ruling of the council. Order. It is not out of order, and it is not violative of the charter, nor can anyone allege it's at least he. So unless there's further discussion, I call the vote.
Okay, so before us is the add 1.3 million plus $1. Which line item was that?
To add the $1.3 million and $1 back to the municipal court fines and offset the levy, which would actually, to offset the levy by the corresponding amount.
Okay, so the add 1.3 million and $1 back in. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. McAllister?
No.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt?
No.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
No.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Riggs?
No.
Mr. Sinapi? Yes. Ms. Travis?
No.
3 yes, 6 no, motion fails.
Okay, motion fails. Any other amendments at this time for members of the council? Okay, any amendments?
Yes.
Oh, Councilman Lattiser.
So one of my amendments is regarding, and there's no line item for this. It's on page 5 in personnel, so I'll need guidance from the solicitor with this, is to remove the $76,000 that was taken for a pension advisor, I believe it was. It's maybe not the exact word, and move it back into pension assets.
So
And
one more time, just the amendment, we'll get a
to-
second.
To remove the $76,000 that has created a new line item, it's a new job description for a pension advisor. I'm going to use as the word, is something formal in the binders, and move that money back into the pension assets. That's my motion.
Okay, do we have a second? Second by Councilman Ricks. Go ahead.
The
Councilman
reason for that, Mr. President, is kind of along the lines of some of the things we've been discussing this evening, is this is a brand-new line item. It's just been presented in this budget. It's a new job description. However, we don't have a job description. We don't have what the costs are associated to this position. We don't know, is this going to be an employee position that is going to require benefits, or is it going to be a subcontractor position? There is no explanation to this at all. And I do have concerns because this is being taken out of the pension assets, which belong to the employees. I have a concern as to whether or not this is something that needs to be voted on by the appropriate pension people. So not knowing that and not having the answers to those questions, that's what is prompting me to move that 76 out of this budget and back into pension assets.
Okay, thank you. Can I just get the full number, 76, the dollar amount?
76,000.
76,000, okay. Any questions or comments? Councilman Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I will appeal to the councilman to withdraw with this statement. We had a meeting, and first of all, understand I am the representative for the city council as the finance chair on the pension board, and then we had a meeting where we sought out and to find a company, we hired a company, Siegel, to do a pension administration study, how the city could save money addressing the concerns of this council, how the city could more effectively run the pension, save money, and in a timely manner get the pensions and the financials in order. That recommendation was sent down, and one of the conclusions is that overall, the findings indicate that Warwick and its pension plan staff are generally meeting the needs of participants. The next step is for Warwick leadership and plan trustees review, evaluate, and prioritize. And I'm sorry, I'm just reading as I go. One of the recommendations was create a position so that there is someone who specifically handles the pensions for the city. So therefore, there'll be one person that'll make sure that'll ensure the effectiveness and operations of the pensions, and that anticipates that will organize and work effectively for the city. So they're recommending a pension administrator, if you will, someone who will handle that within the city, and that's where this position comes from, upon a recommendation hired by the pensions board. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councilwoman Travis.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this question is for Mr. Howell. Is this the person that was a retiree that came back to help out, that already knew the process?
I don't know. Councilwoman, I'm speaking on the recommendation of the consultants. I'm speaking on the recommendation of the consultants that we put this in place so that we have someone to oversee the pensions to ensure that it's effective and properly, the overwatch is complete. So instead of running into situations where you have multiple hands trying to assist people with their pensions, there's one person who's responsible for that.
Okay, because I know the personnel director did talk about, someone coming back that was already experienced.
No.
And I was wondering if that's why it was a new position. But you're not sure. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Latta, sir.
To Councilman Howe's opening statement, I have no intentions of withdrawing any of my comments because my comments were very appropriate. I believe that what you're quoting from is the Searle report, I think what it is, a 20-some page document. However, what I said was, we have no knowledge, no information, no anything about this position. Is it a subcontract position? Will there be benefits associated to this? Will there be pensions associated to this? Is this an hourly job, or who is going to oversee this person? What is the job description of this person? We don't have anything. This is essentially just cutting a blank check for $76,000 for a position we know nothing about. What we do know that is in that report is that there appears to be a need for this position. Short of that, we have no idea what it means. And I don't know, and perhaps through the chair to Councilman Howe, maybe you can tell us as finance chair, will this position be paying benefits? Do we have healthcare costs associated with it? Is there pensions? Is it an employee? Is it a subcontractor? We have no knowledge. So what we're doing is we're just appropriating $76,000, which we could do, at any time during the year. This can be an item that goes out for bid, and this position can be done through the bid process. So to me, this is something that we are funding, but we are funding blindly because we have no idea what this position entails, what it costs, who's going to do it, who is overseeing it, who's overseeing this person, who does this person answer to. So that's my issues, and that's my reasons for moving it back into the pension assets.
It is located in the Personnel Department, Mr. President, just to answer your question, but if the administration.
Thank you. Mayor, do you have thoughts on this amendment?
Well, yes, on that reasoning, you can just take every employee out of the budget because he knows nothing about all of their job descriptions, what the costs associated are. Peter, I'd like you to speak to this position because you have, better knowledge of it.
Absolutely, it's going to be a position posted, regular city employee position. The funding source would be pension assets. And it's based upon and it won't happen until the retirement board acts, and that's in the mayor's budget message. Nothing's going to happen until the retirement board both approves doing this and second, using pension assets for the purposes of funding it.
So in other words, we can't move that money anywhere. It's not our money. It comes from the pension board. So if the position wasn't created, the money wouldn't exist.
Any questions or comments? Just let me check, make sure. Anyone that hasn't got a chance to speak yet? Councilman Lattiser.
I couldn't understand what the mayor's comments were about all the employees, but my question to Mr. Schaefer is, do I understand you correctly that this will be a payroll position?
Yes.
It will come with all of the benefits, et cetera, of that position?
Yes.
And under whose supervision is that person?
The personnel director.
And does that person work out of the personnel department?
Yes.
So it will be, in fact, a new position created in personnel?
Yes.
And this expenditure has been approved by the pension board?
No, the mayor's message talks about not proceeding on this until the retirement board meets at its next meeting in June.
So we don't even know if the pension board is going to approve this or
Yes,
not?
and that's what the mayor's message said.
Okay. Is this something that the members of the bargaining unit would have to vote on, being that it's their pension assets that are being spent?
Well, they're members, the bargaining unit participates on the retirement board, so they will certainly have a vote.
A member of the union
Yes.
sits on the pension board.
Yes.
The members of the union do not all sit on the pension board.
That's
My
correct.
question was, do the members of the respective bargaining groups have to vote for this expenditure of their assets?
The answer is no.
You're positive of that?
Yes.
Okay.
And I would add to that, the public does have seat on the board. It's called an elected official, the people they elect and the people they appoint. And that would probably be,
I
that would be
understand that.
myself. Thank you,
I understand
Councilman.
that,
And I
Councilman.
also would like to address that, yes, they would be entitled to health care, the same as every part-time member of this council has health care, and
Yeah.
quite a few take advantage of.
Exactly, and I
Thank
am
you.
one of them. I am one of them. You want to keep alluding
One
to
at a
that,
time,
and
please.
I absolutely do, Councilman Howe, and I'm very familiar with the makeup of the pension board because I served on it for 4 years, in case and if you happen to forget. So I'm well aware of how it works. The questions are prudent. It doesn't require, nor does it warrant your critiquing or criticism, sir.
Okay, any other questions or comments on this amendment? So the Lattiser amendment at this time is to withdraw the $76,000 and put it back into the pension assets line item. It's been moved and second. The clerk will call the roll for favorable action. No.
Mr. Foley?
No.
Mr. Gephardt?
No.
Mr. Howe?
No.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
No.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? No. Ms. Travis?
No.
2 yes, 7 no, motion fails. Amendment fails.
Thank you. Councilman Lattiser?
Yes, I have another one. It's actually my last one. By the way, just for the record, I'd just like to point out that last year, I had made 3 or 4 amendments, of which the votes all came 8-1, me being the one. And I would point out that the proof is in the pudding.
Councilman, you got to make an amendment,
Sir,
get a second.
Got it. Okay. Well, as I said, this one is a bit complicated. We had lengthy discussion regarding step increases and longevity increases, and who is allowed and who is not allowed, policy, no policy, et cetera. So I have copies of what I'm going to read to you. If you'd like a copy, I can present it to all of you. But I'm going to start first with the executive order from Mayor Avedisian back in 2000.
Well, Councilman, we need an amendment first and a second.
Okay, sorry. The amendment will be to remove from the budget any step increases or longevity increases that were awarded to employees who are not qualified to receive, who do not qualify to receive those increases.
Is there a second for discussion?
Second for discussion only.
Yep. Go ahead, Councilman Lattiser.
So the executive order signed by Mayor Avedisian on June 7, 2004, I'm going to read it to you, and I'll read you a follow-up. The Avedisian administration shares the financial concerns of Warwick residents and businesses, and whereas many years ago, a longevity system was implemented as a financial incentive to long-term employees, and whereas the system cost millions of dollars per year, and whereas the city of Warwick wishes to take further steps to reduce the financial impact on the taxpayers. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Scott Avedisian, Mayor of the City of Warwick, do hereby order that non-union employees hired subsequent to July 1st, 2004 will no longer be eligible to receive longevity. A follow-up executive order, and by the way, these executive orders, according to the records that I have not been rescinded. So on 2005, an executive order on 2005, also from Mayor Avedisian, signed by him on May 4th, 2005. It says, whereas the Avedisian administration shares the financial concerns of Warwick residents and businesses, and whereas many years ago, a longevity system was implemented as a financial incentive to long-term employees, and whereas the system costs millions of dollars per year and places an undue burden on the taxpayers. As a part of ongoing efforts to implement cost-saving measures, last year, the Avedisian administration put into effect Executive Order 2004-10 to eliminate longevity payments and to non-union employees hired subsequent to July 4th, 2004. And it is important that that order remain in effect indefinitely. Now, therefore, it be resolved that I, Scott Avedisian, Mayor of the City of Warwick, do hereby reaffirm Executive Order 2004-10. So my point is, based upon those executive orders, it states that those longevity increases and step increases are gone. They do not apply. And that was the discussion that we had on Monday. Unless someone has something that eliminates that or rescinds those executive orders, then I would say that those executive orders remain in place, which means those step increases and longevity increases that were spoken to at length and referred to as such should be removed from the budget. That's what I've got.
Thank you, Councilman Lattiser, sir. Councilman Ricks.
I'm recalling our first, or at least my first, budget hearing along with the council president and finance chair Tim Howe. Back in 2017, we had numerous amendments to that budget. During that budget, as part of the Mayor Avedisian's proposed budget, there were numerous department heads and the like who were being given raises in double digits, 10, 12, 15, sometimes greater than 15%. And this city council, including Councilman Lattiser, examined those various line items. In fact, if I recall correctly, Councilman Lattiser truly took the lead with that. And the city council chopped those raises down, in most cases, chopped them down to single-digit raises as opposed to double-digit raises. Thereafter, Mayor Avedisian declined to veto the budget. However, he made a statement that he would honor the raises, original double-digit raises as promised, and that's what he did. So I have to be cognizant here that when it comes to an amendment to reduce some of these raises to various non-union employees who are not entitled to a step raise or the like by virtue of a union contract, yes, it's true that they do not automatically receive those raises. It is something that the administration ultimately decides and has the prerogative to include that in their proposed budget. And we have the prerogative as a city council to cut those proposed raises. However, at the end of the day, the administration does have the authority under the city charter to rearrange money within the tax levy in order to fund those various increases, even if and despite the city council cutting those particular line items. In this particular situation, from our previous discussions as a city council, and I am open to new information on this, but the information that has been raised during the presentations to this time, it does not strike me as the rather ridiculous double-digit raises that Mayor Avedisian was giving to well over a dozen different positions. So I think that the mayor, the administration are within their authority to have certain reasonable step increases to certain non-union employees. And unless we as a city council want to make a symbolic gesture amendment to reduce those particular line items, I think that where it's warranted, I'm in favor of it, just as I voted back in 2017, but I'm not going to take the position of saying that the mayor, the administration don't have the authority to necessarily give any sort of increase to various non-union employees either. Just factoring in inflation, things of that nature, and trying to run the city and retain employees in a business-like manner. So those are my comments, and I'm open to changing my mind based on the facts being different than my understanding of them. But at this time, I would be leaning toward voting no on this particular amendment for those reasons. Thank you.
Councilman Foley.
Can I call the question, please?
Is there any additional questions or comments on this? Okay, it has been moved in second for the Lattiser amendment. Moved in second for favorable action. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. McAllister?
No.
Mr. Foley?
No.
Mr. Gephardt?
No.
Mr. Howe?
No.
Mr. Lattiser? Mr. McElroy?
No.
Mr. Ricks?
No.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
No.
1 yes, 8 no, amendment fails.
Thank you. Councilman Lattiser, any more amendments?
That's all I have.
Do we have any more amendments at this time from members of the council? Okay, Solicitor Walsh.
So I have something. So I'm not sure if we want to take a break first because it's weird and complicated.
If we could do the one housekeeping item quick.
Yes, let's do a housekeeping
We
item.
do have PCR 4849, which is the supplemental and transfers from the prior fiscal. If we want to address that quick before we set the final budget and rate.
Is there any?
Solicitor, I'm sorry, if you could speak up. I really just cannot hear you.
We've been discussing and making amendments on PCR 49 with the budget. We do also have PCR 4824 that we want to address as a vote first. So this is the supplemental and transfers and emergency appropriations. It's a separate item. Before we conclude the other business, it'd be good to do this one first. So if there's no objection from the council to proceed to.
So this is line item PCR 4824, and then Councilman Sinapi has a question before we vote on the actual physical budget. What's that? Yeah, question. Any questions on PCR 48-24? Okay, hearing none, the clerk will call the roll for. We need a motion to move it favorable. Motion by Foley, second by Howe, and Councilman McElroy. Thank you. Favorable action on PCR 48-24. The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley? Mr. Gephardt? Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Ricks?
Yes.
Mr. Sinapi? Ms. Travis?
Yes.
9 yes.
Thank you. So next is PCR 49-24. Councilman Sinapi.
So I'm in receipt of a memo, a legal memo regarding revenue, whether or not the council has the authority to change it. And I'm not comfortable voting until we get word on that, because I don't want to vote counter to a legal memo and then run into legal troubles later and not having bothered to address this.
If the question is whether we have the authority to address revenue items, it's something we do every year. The rainy day fund is an example of a revenue item that we borrow from and pay back. And we've made amendments in the past to address different revenue components. And it seems odd to not be able to address one half of an item of the budget itself. The charter allows for the council in section 5.5 to increase and decrease different items except for certain fixed items and have to either offset them or add it to the levy. So I would respectfully disagree with the assessment that we do not have the authority to modify any revenue projection, regardless of how precise or imprecise they are.
So just so I'm clear, I mean, the part about the rainy day fund doesn't seem material because that's just shifting funds from one to another as opposed to revenue. But Section 5.5 of the charter lays out powers that the council has. It says the powers that we have specifically, and obviously if it doesn't say them, we don't have them. And it only references proposed expenditures, and the only time it references revenue is the levy, and only collaterally, insofar as we only can change it if we increase the total expenditures.
The opening sentence of 5.5, the council may insert new items or may increase or decrease the items of the budget, except items in proposed expenditures fixed by law. Before us is incorporated as part of PCR 49 are 3 different booklets of information that have both revenue and expenditures. A plain reading of the charter would indicate that the council has the abilities of both sides of the ledger.
Alrighty, just bear in mind, not only do I not agree with that, but I think we risk a legal challenge over something silly. But I was already going to vote no on the budget anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Okay, so Solicitor, while you have your mic on, can you give us where we stand at this point so everybody is clear what's before us with the math that you went with the administration, and I'll just ask them to confirm that we have the same numbers.
Back to PCR 4924, we have made a series of amendments that in total add $1,050,000 to the tax levy. This corresponds to a 7-cent increase per thousand to the residential and 12-cent increase per thousand to the commercial. So the new figures that are being amended into PCR 4924 sub A are that the total personal property in section 2 of the resolution, the new sum is increased by the $1,050,000 to a total of $236,550,000. And in section 4, the new rates per the sub A would be class 1 property $14.47 per thousand, and class 2 property $25.32 per thousand, and class 3 remains unchanged.
And I just want to confirm with the administration, those are the same numbers that you have, correct? The treasurer and the finance director are shaking their heads, yes. So that is before us here. It's PCR 49-24 as amended. Questions on the overall, Councilman Howe?
So what is the total? The mayor came to us with a 1.48% increase. What is the total percent increase that we are looking at with that additional 7 or the 7 cent?
I'll defer to the finance director for the precise figure.
1.97.
One.
Once again, that doesn't mean the mayor signed on. I'm just saying from this act,
Understood.
adding $1,050,000, that's the rates would go up 1.97% instead of 1.48%.
Any other questions or comments on PCR 49-24 as amended? Do we have a motion? Councilman Foley.
Move favorable action.
Second by Councilman Gephardt. The clerk will call a roll for favorable action on PCR 49-24 as amended.
Mr. McAllister?
Yes.
Mr. Foley?
Yes.
Mr. Gephardt?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Lattiser?
Yes.
Mr. McElroy?
Yes.
Mr. Riggs?
Yes.
Mr. Snappy?
Yes.
Ms. Travis?
Yes.
9 yes as amended.
Thank you. 9 yes as amended. We're now moving to unanimous consent. Ward 1, anything to docket under unanimous consent?
Mr. President, excuse me. So we're voting on the entire budget at that vote?
Correct.
I move to reconsider.
Yeah, I'd join him on that one.
Okay.
I was under a different impression. Sorry.
As was I. I thought we were voting on the other portion and then going to vote on the thing overall.
We already
So,
voted.
Our own fault, not yours. It's fine.
Okay, all right. Read and consider by Lattiser, second by Sinapi. Clerk will call the roll. They want to reconsider. They didn't.
The budget was
no.
passed 9-0.
We misunderstood.
There was a request to reconsider and seconded by another member, both of the prevailing side. Yes.
Yeah. No, we're voting on their motion to reconsider, so they could change
To bring
their
it
vote.
back before us. Well, is it
They're
merely
gonna
to
change their
change the
vote.
vote, or is it to discuss?
Sorry?
Is it to change the vote or to discuss?
No, I want to change the vote.
If there,
I'm done with discussion.
if there's, so
Objection.
is there anybody else who's in the similar position where it's not changing the outcome of the vote? Is anyone else looking to change their vote? Donna is, anyone else?
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
We'll do a clean
We'll hear
vote.
the motion to reconsider. Any objections?
Any objections to reconsidering? Okay, so hearing none, we are back before us on PCR 4924 as amended. So
The item by unanimous consent has been brought back before us. Councilman Foley, if you wish to make the same amendment on favorable action as amended.
Councilman Foley.
We are repeating the process because the
We're doing the
members wanted
process
to
again. They
change
want to
their
change
vote.
their
Okay, so we are now voting again on the budget.
Correct.
I move favorable action.
Thank you. Second by Councilman Howe, Councilman Ricks, Councilman Gephardt. Okay, so this is the vote on the budget, PCR 4924 as amended. The clerk will call the roll for favorable action. Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Thank you. Six yes, 3 no. The motion passes. All right. Now we move to unanimous consent. Ward 1, anything under unanimous consent? Ward 2? Pass. Ward 3? Ward 4?
Pass.
Ward 5?
Pass.
Ward 6?
Pass.
Ward 7 passes. Ward 8?
Solicitor, do you want me to docket that thing now, or do we just keep doing what we're doing?
We're under unanimous consent.
I know.
There's anything you bring before unanimous consent, if it's currently docketed, would be on the next agenda, or if draftable, it could also just be docketed, so it would probably be a
All
docket
right.
item.
Pass.
Ward 9?
Pass.
Councilwoman Travis?
If there be no further business of this honorable body, I move to a docket session.
All those in favor of moving the docket session, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Didn't think so. Ward 1, anything to docket this evening? Ward 2? Pass. Ward 3? Ward 4?
Pass.
Ward 5?
I have 7.
Yeah.
Pass.
Ward 6?
Pass.
Ward 7 passes. Ward 8?
1, resolution of support of the Rhode Island Civil Rights Enforcement Act.
Intergovernmental. Looking for co-sponsors. Foley, Ricks, Councilman McElroy, Councilwoman Travis. Ward 9.
Pass.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. We are adjourned.